Good evening. Prior to us coming back to order, I'd like to refer anyone who needs translator services to Ms. Valbuena at the podium.
Buenas tardes. Habla Paula Valbuena. Si necesita servicios de interpretación al español, por favor, llame al 1805-324-7680 e ingrese el código de acceso 124-702-246 más la tecla numeral. Este es un número totalmente gratis. Nuevamente, llame al número de teléfono 1805-324-7680 e ingrese el código de acceso 124-702-246 más la tecla numeral. También puede acceder a estas instrucciones en nuestro sitio web en mcs4kids.com, dirigiéndose a la parte inferior de la página en Quick Links y haciendo clic en Board Agendas para ir a la agenda de esta noche. Muchísimas gracias. Si alguien aquí en esta junta, yo voy a estar en la parte de atrás, alguien que necesite interpretación al español. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valbuena. Welcome to the Modesto City Schools 1467th regular board meeting of October 18th, 2021. This meeting is now called to order. In closed session, the board gave direction to legal counsel. I would like to begin this evening with a moment of silence, so please stand and join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. You may be seated. Good evening, everyone. This open session meeting of the Board of Trustees is now being live streamed at the direction of the board. The live stream is available on the district's website, and the recordings will be available for viewing the day after the board meeting. Modesto City School board meetings have been adjusted to follow health and safety precautions until further notice. Modesto City Schools has provided an opportunity for the public to provide comments. It is outlined in the agenda. The public has been given the opportunity to call in and leave a voicemail, send a comment via email, or appear in person before the board. Any public comments received via email or voicemail prior to noon on the day of the board meeting will not be read aloud, but they have been transcribed and printed with copies provided to each board member prior to the start of the board meeting, and they are available to the public. The voice and email public comments will be attached to future board meeting minutes for approval. This practice will continue until further notice. For members of the public that are interested in commenting in the future, we welcome your comments. We now will go on to the comment statements. If you wish to address the board during the period for public comment on a subject which is not on the agenda, you must complete a public presentation request card and submit it to the board president prior to the period for public comment. Every person who wishes to address the board, please fill out a card. You will find the cards in the lobby, and you can hand your comment card to Ms. Chambers. If you plan to speak on a topic, please fill out a card now, as no cards will be accepted after the period for public comment has begun. The maximum time for any one speaker is 3 minutes, for a total of 30 minutes. We will now move on to our pledge, the Pledge of Allegiance, and we are pleased to welcome tonight students from Everett Elementary School who will be leading us in the flag salute tonight. When I call your name, please stand. The first student is 6th grader Julio. Is Julio here? How nice you look. Julio is a member of the Student Council and Traffic Safety Patrol. He is an amazing student who loves to take on challenges. Julio works hard in school and is very inquisitive in class. He enjoys painting and playing his violin. Following college, Julio would like to be a scientist. Our other person helping us with the pledge tonight is Marion. Marion, would you please stand? Thank you. Marion is also a sixth grader and a member of the Traffic Safety Patrol. Over summer, she participated in summer enrichment programs to further her education. She enjoys spending time with family, especially her little sister. Is your little sister here tonight? Where is she? Nice. Oh. Following college, Marion is considering a career as a police officer where she can serve as an advocate in her community and help those in need. Thank you both. Will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. You may be seated. And students, we would like to get a picture with you, please. Thank you so much to those students. We now will move on to A5, and this is Superintendent Naguchi's welcome announcements.
Wonderful. Thank you, President West. Thank you, everyone, for coming out this evening. It's great to see so many smiling eyes out there instead of some happy faces. So thank you for coming out, and thank you for those that have tuned in tonight via the internet. I first want to start by saying thank you and to everyone that really pulled together and redesigned our short-term independent study model. Today was the first day of that new independent study model. I recognize a lot of planning went into it, a lot of hard work went into learning new platforms, and so I just want to acknowledge district office staff, administrators, MTA, everyone coming together. While we recognize the best environment for our students for learning is in the classroom, we've found ourselves with a lot of quarantine students out there, and so we really are doing our best to try to meet the educational needs of those students that are forced to stay home. So a big shout out and thank you to everyone concerned. I'm very excited about this evening. Tonight we are engaging in a welcoming ceremonies for all of our managers that are either new to the district or new in their positions. This is an annual celebration, and I think it's really important to acknowledge not only the managers, but really the leadership, and I'll talk about leadership when we get to that ceremony, so it's very exciting. Later in the presentation, we do have a student outcome presentation, and I really want to preface it a little bit, and I know Mr. Godot will in the later on today as well, but as you all know, we were in COVID last year. Most of our secondary students were at home. Our elementary students were in hybrid. It's going to be really easy to want to compare data sets from year to year, and while yes, we have some comparative data, we just have to remember the context. We are living in a time that we are never going to live in again, and so just be mindful as we go through that presentation. I do think it's important to share the data, though. We need to share where our kids are at and how to look at where we're at and set goals for moving forward. So I do think that is important for that. I do want to take just a minute to speak about the statement or the governor's announcements last week on vaccinations. There are a lot of misinformation out there, so I want to be really clear for our community and where we're at. The state of California, different communities and different school districts are doing all sorts of different things, and that is to their own. Modesto City Schools is not mandating a vaccine at this time. However, we do need to follow laws and guidelines from California. At this time, in looking at the governor's website today, when I went on and looked, it states, and I quote, based on current information, and this is the important piece to note here, based on current information, the requirement is expected to apply to grades 7 through 12 July 1st. So for those that have a lot of anxiety and a lot of misinformation relative to, is it required now, is it required in January, it really, according to the governor, it's not going to apply till July 1. A lot can happen between now and July 1. I don't know what that looks like. All I know is at this time it is not a requirement. So with that, hopefully that clarifies some miscommunication out there and misconceptions, and I will turn it over to President West.
Thank you. We will move on now to our Board of Education member reports. Does anyone have anything to report at this time? Trustee Brown?
So a few things to report. First of all, I continue to attend the construction committee meetings and am pleased to just reiterate how much progress is being made within the district with so many different projects, both from our bond monies and from other funding sources. Great improvements happening all across the district, and I thank our team for all the effort that is going into that. And then along with my fellow colleagues to my left, Trustee Marks and Trustee Mejia, we had a wonderful celebration, or were able to be part of a wonderful celebration at Fairview Elementary School as we witnessed the groundbreaking for the cafeteria structure and a lot of other things that are happening at that site to improve safety for our students and improve the learning environment for the students that attend that campus. So fun to be on campus with kids again and see their eyes. We didn't necessarily see their smiles, but we saw their eyes, and that told us how engaged they were, and it was a lot of fun. And last thing I want to say is that I know from personal experience in my own business that COVID fatigue is running rampant in our community. There's a lot of pressures that are hitting us from all sides, and everyone's exhausted. And I just want to thank everyone in the district for all the efforts every day dealing with and creating opportunities for kids to learn in safe places. And I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Mejia and then Trustee Marks.
Yes, I just want to say it was incredible to go to the Fairview groundbreaking. It was incredible. At the end, once we finished everything, I got this, one of the sixth grade classes got to spend some minutes with me about just talking about their ideas and plans and just talking about the design. So it was an incredible to hear these kids talk about it and interact. It was incredible. It was really awesome to be there, and also got a chance to see some long childhood friends that are working with the district and you know, moving from where they started into other positions in the district. It was incredible. So I know we didn't see each other without masks, most of us, but it was incredible to just walk the campus, see folks, and especially talk to the students for future plans, kind of where they're going, what they want to go. When they're in sixth grade, they're already thinking what their careers are going to be. So that was pretty incredible to talk to them. So I was really excited to be there.
Thank you. Trustee Marks?
Just to continue on with that dialogue with the students was really awesome, though they won't get to see the completion of this project. So right now the students meet in a cafeteria that only holds about 300, and I think the new auditorium and / cafeteria will be able to hold almost the entire school for an assembly, which they've never been able to do before at that campus. So it'll be really awesome to have them be able to do that. And then just talking to them, because they won't be there for the completion, They were asking to have him come back. And Trustee Brown did a great job on his comments and all the hard work that went into all of you helping to get the bond passed, and how that's the funding that's going to pay for this new project that they're doing at the school site. So it'll be quite noisy for a couple of months for them. Out there in the quad, it's a school that's kind of built around the center, and the new project is going to be in the center of this grassy area that and it'll be a great, because location is really easy for everyone to get to. So I think it's going to be awesome. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the completion at some future date. And I said, hey, those students in 6th grade are going to be at Hanshaw, and we're doing some work there too. So that'll be good.
Thank you. See no other lights. We will move on to our recognitions. And Dr. Naguchi, would you talk about the pinning ceremony, please?
Before I get into some of the logistics, I want to first, again, welcome family and friends for coming out tonight. I know it's one more thing at the end of the day, but it's really important to celebrate ourselves, and more importantly, celebrate leadership. The people that are here in this room for this ceremony have been hired by Modesto City Schools, and the agenda item is actually called, welcoming managers, but I don't see you as managers, I see you as leaders. Something that I've been talking about for the last 4 years since I was first hired here is really looking at how do we create a district that's truly a destination district. And what do I mean by that? A destination district where parents and students from all over this county, they choose Modesto City Schools because it is the best district in this county. Well, we can't do that without the people in this room, because we can't do that without strong leadership. And those of you that are hired and that are going to be recognized tonight are at the center of that. I see some veteran leaders in here. I can kind of see your eyes and recognizing some of you behind your masks. They know that I've been talking about this for 3 years, just really the need for investing in ourselves, investing in our people, and not only individually, but collectively, because the stronger we are individually and the stronger we are collectively as a team, the better our district is going to be. And I believe that it's in this room, and so I'm very excited to be able to celebrate you all tonight. So with that, I'm going to talk a little logistics. So we are going to be calling up the individual leaders / managers, individual leaders, and the cabinet member will be calling individuals up and their support person. As we begin the ceremony, something we need to remember, I know it's a downer, but we have to try to abide by those health and safety protocols. So I'd love to shake your hand, but we can't shake hands. And all the board members are going to be up here too. And honestly, we only have to do this a couple more months, maybe 6 months, and then we're going to get through this. And next year, we're going to be shaking each other's hands and giving each other a big old hug. But tonight, we're just going to nod and maybe give an elbow bump or something, but we're going to keep our hands to ourselves. We are going to start with the transportation department and then site level leadership, which is a big chunk of you, which is very exciting. We're going to then move to human resources, and lastly, we will acknowledge a few folks in student support services. So the logistics, we're going to come up this hallway right here, just this aisle right here. You're then going to come up to this aisle. President West will give you a pin, and then you will have that pin put on you either by the person that you came with or yourself, whatever you're comfortable with. And then you're going to walk out that door, and you're going to go get your picture taken, and then you'll see it all on the walls back there at another time. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Zerley to come up to the podium because he's going to start, and I'm going to ask the board members to go from here to the door. So thank you. I'm going to hold these, and you're going to give it to the person. There you guys can do this home. No shaking hands. I'm watching.
Good evening. I'm honored to present to you 4 of our new managers in business services. The first is Katie Biglow, the Nutrition Services Supervisor at Thomas Downey High School. And she is here tonight with her husband, Jack Biglow. Next, we have Monique Fraticelli Esparza. She is a new Senior Operations Supervisor in the Transportation Department, and she is here tonight with her transportation mentor, Ralph Meza.
Yeah, they put the pressure on you. He's going too fast. Okay. Hands outside.
Next up from the Transportation Department is Estella Adams, a Training and Safety Operations Supervisor. And finally, in Transportation, Wendy James, Assistant Director of Transportation.
Good evening to everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce to you this evening our leaders at the site level that are being recognized. And we're going to start with Justin Broussard, a Vice Principal at Bret Harte Elementary School. Very well, very well. Next, we have Rodolfo Garibay, Vice Principal at Bret Harte Elementary School, and his spouse, Adriana, not here. That's fine. Papith Lee, Vice Principal at Bret Harte, along with Principal Marla Conte. Next, we have Donna Bush. Donna works in our early childhood education program. She's the coordinator of recruitment, enrollment, and attendance. Thank you, Donna. And then we have Gregory Hicks, Assistant Principal at Elliott Alternative School. And with him is Principal Sarah Cox. We have Jenny Kuchar, Vice Principal at Fairview Elementary. And with her is Principal Jennifer Malone. And we have Sarah Winding, Assistant Principal at Grace Davis High School. And with her is Andrew Ratto, her fiance. And next we have Kevin Drake, Assistant Principal at Enox High School. I'd like to point out Kevin is one of my former students, which makes me quite proud. Yes, there is hope. I was not the barrier. Next, we have Linda Reese, Vice Principal at Lakewood and Sonoma Elementary Schools, and with her this evening is Principal Denise Powell. Now we have Elias Pugh, Assistant Principal at Johansson High School, and with him this evening is Neil Singh. Good evening. And we have Carrie Fabella, Vice Principal at Rose Avenue Elementary, and with her is Mark Fabella. Next, we have Marilyn De La Cruz, Assistant Principal at Downey High School, and with her this evening is Principal David Sanchez. Looks like Mr. Sanchez is doing double duty this evening. Next, we have Patrick Rodden, Assistant Principal at Downey High School also. And with that, I believe Mr. Henderson is going to bring up our HR team.
Good evening. I'm Mike Henderson, Human Resources, and it's my pleasure to introduce Maria Mariscal, the Supervisor of Employee Benefit Programs, who is accompanied by her husband, Fräulein. Thank you for being here. Mr. Herbst?
All right, now let's go into Student Support Services. First up, Michelle Sullivan, Program Manager, Special Education. Next up, we have Miss Bridget Hobbs, accompanied by husband Dusty Hobbs, again, another Program Manager in Special Education. And last, but certainly not least, Miss Fallon Ferris, Equity and Intervention Specialist, Student Support Services. Welcome, Fallon. And with that, Dr. Naguchi, that takes care of who we are recognizing.
That's it, and thank you, and actually all of our awardees are outside, so we're just going to move on to the next agenda item. Although we're going to move this around.
Now we're going to saw someone in half?
Yeah. Thank you.
Volunteer.
Thank you. That was fun. It's always nice to have our recognitions. We're moving on to A8, which is the approval of the consent agenda. So prior to this, do we have any comments regarding the consent agenda items from the public tonight? On the consent agenda. Okay, seeing none. Do we have any questions or comments from board members on the consent agenda? See none. I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda. It is moved by Trustee Maestas, seconded by Trustee Mejia. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. We'll move on now to the approval of the order of the discussion items. Do I hear a motion to approve the order of the discussion items? Approval by Trustee Marks and seconded by Trustee Irvin. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. We're moving on now to Section A10, which is our period for public presentations. Thank you again for attending tonight's meeting and for showing interest in our schools. I have 7 cards tonight. And so each speaker will be coming to the podium to address the board. As a reminder, you'll each have 3 minutes to speak. We just want to remind you that although we cannot engage in discussion or take formal action on items that are not on the agenda, we do thank you for following the protocol in addressing the board and for taking time to share your views with us tonight. So the first card that I have is Jennifer Parsons. I think that would be okay.
My name is Jennifer Parsons.
Is the microphone on?
Hello? Okay. My name is Jennifer Parsons. I have 2 students, grandchildren actually, in the Modesto City School, one at Downey and one at John Muir. My Downey student is carried a 4.0 consistently since 8th grade. Very good student, loves school. My 4th grader is in the same position. She's very smart, very active in the school. This mandate, vaccine mandate that the governor has imposed, I feel as a grandmother, and I'm speaking for their parents that can't be here tonight, is totally against what being a parent and being a grandparent is. We have the right to say what goes into our children's body. We have the right to say what we need to let them go through in life. not the school system, not the board, and certainly not the governor. Now, I've pulled up some things from the internet on VAERS, which is an entity that reports adverse reactions to the vaccine, or any vaccine, not just COVID. And they report to the FDA and to the CDC just on adverse reactions. And the two examples I'm going to give you are the flu and COVID-19. So the flu vaccine since 1990 to present, which is about a 31-year gap, has had about, I would say, 800,000 adverse reactions. That's not counting death or anything of that sort. I'm just giving you the adverse reactions. From COVID-19, from December 2020 to present, they have had about 750 adverse reactions. So we have a 31-year gap in the flu as opposed to months with COVID. This vaccine has not been properly tested to put in our children. Now we are going to go to what they're saying at VAERS is saying that the risk of dying from the COVID vaccine is 174.2 times higher than getting the flu vaccine. That's a big risk on putting on kids and making parents go through this. I really feel that this is something that the school board really needs to think carefully. I know every school district does things differently. I've read and looked at things from Orange County where they are completely going with the parents on this thing and standing up for the kids and parents' rights. And I would hope that the Modesto City School Board would do the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Martinez. Shouldn't have let you sit down.
It's okay. I just wanted to support Grandma as community. My name is Debbie Martinez, and I am with We Are La Raza Parents Union, along with California School Foundation, California Legal Rule Association, and the Latino Community Roundtable. And my hat gets bigger as I wake up every day. I'm here today because I want to emphasize and hope that Modesto City Schools will adopt what other districts are adopting. You know that I'm in 20 districts, 3 counties, and right now, equitable grading. In order for me to put the brakes on California School Foundation, hopefully if they pass in November, that will cripple the system. But I think we can also work with the system. Equitable grading. I happen to go today over on Reno, and thank you, Dr. Naguchi, that we do have a EL office that I was very pleased with. Aaron and I went, and we want to make sure that our English population of students, doesn't matter what border they come from, that they are getting the equal opportunity under the acts that they are entitled to. Julio and the little Marissa today, right now, their little autobiography of what their future looks like. That's why I stand in the gap to make sure that it's close so that they get those equal opportunities. Modesto City Schools, I see that you guys are climbing up there. I got to give you guys that. We can do more. Right now, I come as community asking that you adopt the equitable grading. That's going to be very vital for our students that are disadvantaged. It's going to be very vital for our English learners, and it's going to be very vital for our special needs children. And so, with that being said, I know that there's educators in the classroom that are tenured out that don't want to make this move, but I'm sure HR has some applications that can replace them. If we all work together as a whole for the whole domination of what we're here for, children, I won't bark as loud no more. So I just wanted to come and thank you guys. And last meeting was not too good, but this one I'm proud and pleased with our English learner department. And I just want to thank those that are overseeing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren White.
Good evening. It's good to be here. I was chuckling to myself when you were talking about the cafeteria at Fairview. I believe I was in sixth grade about 60 years ago. And I ate at that cafeteria. Well, maybe the one before the one is replacing now. So, a few generations ago. But anyway, that's something that I remember. Okay, I've been obviously a Modesto resident for many years. And interestingly enough, only a couple of months ago, I attended my first city school meeting, board meeting. And I was here to support my daughter, who, and along with my wife at that point, and she has 4 children, 4 daughters, 2 of them with an autism diagnosis, and have very special needs. And we were here to protest and to talk about our dissatisfaction with the proposed mask mandates. And I was particularly grateful to the board because as we came, it apparently was one of the first meetings where you actually had people here. You'd been in COVID isolation for many months, and you were welcoming, and I appreciate that very much. So I congratulate you for that. I'm here this evening because of my concern about the recent NSBA letter to the Biden administration. And I've sent a letter to each of the board members, and I'm thankful that you obviously received it. I've received Superintendent Naguchi's response today. I appreciate that response. I felt it didn't quite go far enough, though, in satisfying my concerns. I have a written thing here, but I'm not talking off the top of my head. It didn't go far enough because it really did not state the position of the board in relation to the proposition that those who strongly vocalize their opposition to certain things might be considered potential terrorists. It's shocking. It is shocking. And I would hope that as a board, because of the welcoming nature that you've had in the past, that you would agree that you will welcome all opinions. I abhor the hate mail, the stalking, all those things that have happened that are contrary to Americanism. That's not what I'm here to advocate for. I'm here to advocate compassion, dare I say love, because we can love our neighbors even if we disagree with them. And I hope that you will join me in that in your actions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Noah Castro.
Good evening, MCS board members. My name is Noah Castro, and I'm representing the boys.
Sorry, Noah, we can't. Thank you. Yes.
And I'm representing the boys volleyball group at Grace M. Davis High School. We plan on giving boys a chance to play volleyball competitively in alignment with the girls volleyball program. We're representing MCS schools as a pilot program by officially starting boys volleyball as a competitive sport. We have over 21 boys from Grace Davis High School wanting to play currently. We want the school board support in making us achieve our goal as a group. We need to activate on the timestamp and not miss any of them in order to achieve our goal. By playing this year, our boys are engaged in playing volleyball this year with other high schools. The percentage of schools engaged in sports at Davis High is lower than the other schools, roughly 23% versus 50%. That's why we really need to see this through. Our percentage will go up and we will engage more students with more competitive sports options. Our institution has students from different countries that are wanting to play who do not currently play other sports in the spring. Currently, we do not have an option to play boys volleyball. That's why we are working on making it a sport this year. We have 4 generations to come. We want to make sure boys are included and allowed to play volleyball within the MCS sports package. At this time, I would like you to consider boys volleyball a sport for spring 2022. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right, I'm just kind of tagging along here. So good evening, board members. Nice to see you all. My name is Ronaldo Rucker. I'm a teacher at Grace Davis High School. I'm just supporting the students in this process. So as an active advisor and previous coach, I know how resourceful, proactive, and innovative our school district is. When you all believe in a program and or have students and parents advocating for something, that something usually becomes a real opportunity for our youth. I have a number of statements from former and current MCS male students wishing there was an option to play boys volleyball, including myself. I played in middle school in the Bay Area, and I've spoken to others who confirm that local Modesto junior high schools offer boys volleyball as well. Having the opportunity to play boys volleyball in high school will only increase student success and decrease the percentages of students falling through the cracks. Based on discussions with district representatives, I know this can happen this school year if the timestamps are met, like our student representative stated earlier, Noah. So I just want to thank you all for your support and adequately supporting our students and families. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Cassandra Gomez?
Good evening, school board members, administrators, and staff. My name is Cassandra Gomez, and I'm a parent and a concerned citizen of the community. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Naguchi for already addressing the vaccine mandate announcement that Governor Gavin Newsom announced earlier this month. To second Dr. Naguchi, there is a lot of anxiety from parents that are trying to figure out what they are going to do. There are some parents that are saying, homeschool. I'm going to take my kids out. I'm going to homeschool. There are some parents that are just like, you know what, let me just go ahead and give my child this vaccine already because it sounds like it's going to be forced. But I don't think that it should be a decision that a parent makes because the government is requiring it. I would like to bring to the school board's attention the Stanislaus County COVID dashboard. I just found out about that dashboard through my employer, and it provides a lot of information that is local. And you keep hearing that saying, like, trust the science, look at the data. As of today, the county vaccination rate is 66%, where at least one shot has been administered. So that leaves a remaining 34% of residents that are not vaccinated. Additionally, the dashboard provides data on deaths, local to Stanislaus County. It says the youngest resident's death to be recorded in Stanislaus County is 25 years old. I don't think there are any 25-year-old students at Modesto City Schools. In fact, the age range is recognized 25 to 44 years old, and that only comprises of 5.1% of the deaths in Stanislaus County. This virus is not affecting children. With this data and support, I really urge the board to end the mask requirements and oppose any vaccine mandate. I didn't get a chance to talk about this last month, but I had my son, my 2-year-old son, attending one of the Modesto City Schools home daycare programs. Great program. I had a great person that had seen my 6-year-old since he was 6 months old, 7 months old, had my 2-year-old in there since he was like 8 months old, and I was planning to have my third baby go with her. But when he turned 2, she put a mask on him, and that really scared me because I don't think 2-year-olds should be wearing masks. And I understand it is a CDC recommendation, but that's a recommendation and not a requirement. And I highly urge the board to reconsider that protocol and that practice of enforcing any type of masks on children at the Modesto City School home daycares, because it's so important for our children to see our daycare providers' faces and for the children to see each other's faces as well. I know I'm going to go over my 3 minutes, but I do want to give out acknowledgement and thanks to Mr. Brad Godot, Miss Lauren Odell, and Miss Fallon Ferris. As I discussed last month, I'm here to hopefully be a voice for other parents. It's a lot of effort and work to come here. My husband's at home with the 3 kids. As you all know, I commend you all for being here and wanting to be here. But I wanted to say thank you to those staff members, and I'm still following up on the toilet paper situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian Aguiano?
Good evening. This is Adrian Anguiano, and this is the first time he ever addresses a legislative body. And he is a product of Modesto City Schools speech and debate class during the summer. And he says he learned something, so let's see.
Just take a deep breath. We're here for you, okay? I know it can be scary.
Yes. I'm your parent advocate. I've been advocating for you since you
your
were in
name
the
and
fourth
what
grade.
grade
Go
you are
ahead. Dale. Sí se puede. Ándale. Sí se puede.
Hello, my name is Adrian Anguiano, and I attend Roosevelt Junior High in the 8th grade. And my favorite teacher there is my English teacher. My favorite teacher last year was my honors math teacher, but my honors gate history teacher is the toughest because he gives out a lot of work and there's no late assignments. A lot of teachers have different rules that I have to keep track of, and also all the homework, and I'm not able to go anywhere else outside of my house because of all the homework I have. I only sleep, shower, go in my room to do my work, and that's mostly it. My grades, they're okay right now. I have a 3.66 GPA, 2 B's, and all others are A's. And the 2 B's are from my English and history class. And I think that all the rules for each teacher should be equal, so no other teachers can have like no late assignments. The late assignments could be taken off with points, not just that you don't turn it in and just get an F on it. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.
He would be the reason why I am pushing that Modesto City School Board, I want to go on record, will adopt the equitable grading. It would be a student like him that has dreams to go on and be successful in college, but unfortunately, tenured employees, those with the power of the pen, do not allow our disadvantaged population. He's not disadvantaged, his dad's attorney. But again, they fall through the cracks. And so we're asking that the board be sensitive and adopting that equitable grading so that students like him are not overwhelmed that the teachers are pushing their work at home when it should stay in the school sites. So he would be prime example. This student right here, he's going to be my future civil rights attorney for education in this county. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have the proud papa up next, Aaron Aguiano.
Good evening, board and administration and staff. I'm Aaron Anguiano. I'm the parent. I'm Adrian's father and president of the Latino Community Roundtable here in Stanislaus County. I know most of you, and you're pleasant and nice, and Ms. Naguchi had lots of conversations with her. She even answers my emails during the weekend. Can you believe that? And can text me too, and I have texted her too. Anyway, so, and her idea of a destination district is great. We had to make it a destination district, but for everybody. And remember, you have like 67% Latino students. They had to watch. See, Adrian was in the English language learners. And, excuse me, and I'm a little upset and infuriated right now about what's going on. But anyways, he's a product of the English learners program. And I wanted to go talk to the English nurse programs, and guess what? I didn't know where it was. And he's in 8th grade, and he's been there since kindergarten. I find out it's way over there, somewhere hiding. I was lost and I couldn't find it today. There's no sign, and then their budget, I think, is just too small. They need a lot more work to do and a lot of help and a bigger budget, not like 800,000 or 2 million. They need a lot more millions, okay, because they have a lot of work to do. The reason why I think Aiden is failing in his homework and in-class assignments and extra credit is because sometimes our children some teachers don't even like our children, I think. And so they give them directions and they don't understand. They were not raised in a English-speaking house. You can't talk to all of them the same way. So I think that when you grading homework and extra credit and all that, you put a lot of bias into it, lots. And I found out after I met with the administration at the school side, and so I wanted to tell you that you need to do something about it. They bring their bias with them as stereotypes, and they grade our children accordingly. They told me that, that my son doesn't put enough effort in his classes. Can you believe that? I went to college 10 years, and I know what effort means. You're not going to tell me what effort means, please. And therefore, because he doesn't put in that effort, he's not going to go to the IB program that he dreams to go to. And so then what's going on here? Somebody needs to do something. It's your job. And I was in the equity committee, and then, sorry, please. Thank you. If you want to hear from me, call me. You have my cell phone number. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public comments. And again, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, for taking time out. I especially enjoyed hearing from our students. I think this is a great lesson for them to know that voice your opinion. And I just appreciate everything that you've done, and I appreciate all the comments, especially from the young people tonight. And so thank you again for being here. We're moving on now to item B, discussion and action items, which is our student representative to the board report. Speaking of another student, so thank you for your service.
All right, can you hear me? Okay, cool. First and foremost, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all having a great day. Inter High just held their second meeting of the year last week, and we were actually able to meet in person at Davis High School. I want to thank Ms. Hewlin for being the person to arrange all of it and to really take care of all of the logistics. This was something that a vast majority of students indicated that they wanted from Inter High Council this year, so I'm really glad that we were able to make it happen. In terms of school reports, pretty much every school reported on their homecoming efforts. They're either already done by now or they're about to hold homecoming soon, which is really exciting for students. Schools are also working on integrating Breast Cancer Awareness Month into their activities, and some schools have even raised funds for the cause. Additionally, Inter High is currently working on changing the board policy regulating Inter High membership. The current board policy essentially states it limits membership to elected ASB students, and we want to change that to allow students who are not in ASB join Inter High as well, to ensure that our council is being representative and diverse. As some of you may or may not know, I personally am not in ASB. I never ran for any elected position in ASB, and yet I'm the president of the council now. So I think that's just one example of how we can be missing valuable voices due to this policy. And at the meeting, we were all in unanimous support of changing this policy, so we're working on that right now. And I think more than that, though, it's really been eye-opening for students to see that policies can be changed. They're not set in stone. They're not meant to be just, left to just stay there forever, stagnant. And you don't have to be a politician or, a policymaker to change these policies. We all have that power. And it's something that you were talking about just right now. And so I think this process is really showing students that it's important to be vocal for the issues that you care about. And if you are vocal and if you actually pursue it, you can make a difference. And so I'm really excited about that. And finally, we ended our inter-high meeting having a really candid conversation about mental health, and we were just wanting to make sure that students are constantly aware of the resources that are available to them. We also discussed different ways that ASBs can make sure that that information stays fresh in students' minds even after a campaign to raise awareness happens. But beyond that, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the report on student outcomes later tonight, and that's pretty much all for my report.
Thank you so much, Student Representative Banaka. Moving on, do we have anyone here from the California School Employees Association who wishes to speak have a report? Seeing none, we will move on to item B3, which is the approval of the first reading of the board policy and review of administrative regulation BPAR 3350 travel expenses. Mr. Zierli?
Thank you, President Wes. Good evening, trustees. We're bringing this forward tonight outside of our special board workshop for board policies in coordination with the implementation of our new district electronics travel software, which is called Concur, and current district practices for travel-related expenses. So what you see is a board policy 3350. On pages that are referenced with C and D, that's our existing board policy language. We're proposing to strike out all of that language that's currently in existence and replace it with the red font beginning on the first page to align with CSBA language for this particular board policy. We have made some adjustments for our current practices that you'll note with the red being stricken, but we ask for approval of first reading of board policy and AR 3350.
Thank you, Mr. Zierli. We'll go out to any comments from the public on this agenda item. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this topic? Seeing none, we'll come back to the board members. Do we have any questions or comments from board members? Trustee Marks?
I appreciate having a board policy. I don't think we've ever had a board policy on travel. It's always been an AR, so I think it's great, and I appreciate the edits and the review and how it was translated from some of the AR into the board policy, so that was helpful. So if there aren't any other comments, I'd make a motion to approve.
I see no other lights, so this is, oh, Trustee Brown, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, you're moving right ahead. So we have it, a motion to approve by Trustee Marks and a second by Trustee Brown. All in favor of the approval of the first reading of the review of the AR and BP 3350 on travel expenses. Raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? See none. This passes unanimously. Moving on now to item B4. Super excited to hear this report from Dr. Aquanafa. Mr. Herbst?
Yeah, good evening, Board President West, trustees, Superintendent Naguchi, and Cabinet. As a reminder for some historical context, it was in 2018 that we began contracting with Dr. Jason Aquanafa. And back then it was really to provide key recommendations regarding our disciplinary policies, practices, and culture. One of his key recommendations was the implementation of the Teacher Perspective Program using Mindset Solutions bi-directional surveys. And tonight we are very, very fortunate to have Dr. Jason Aquanafa to talk about the survey results from last year and talk about our next steps going forward. So please, Dr. Jason Aquanafa.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, just as promised. Okay. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction. It's been a pleasure to work with you all for the past years. I'm just going to briefly, hey, good to see you. This is my second Board of Education meeting in years, and the first one in person. I'm glad y'all are able to make this happen. You're prepared with the glass and everything. So I'm just going to jump right in. I'm going to provide you with very targeted reminders of what we found in our randomized controlled trial throughout the school district, the key findings that are related to our ongoing efforts and evaluations to date, and then to let you know indeed where we are to date. Not going to leave you in suspense. I have good news. There is one element that I do think that you all will want to pay attention to and just something to think about. And overall at this time, my biggest recommendation is just keep moving forward, and we'll have more definitive information after this next step as Mr. Hurst is rolling out it's a different approach that's going to be happening this school year. It's already been planned, it's already underway, and I'm just going to let you know where we are. So quickly, as it pertains to participation, and so what we came up with was a plan in which we would provide the equivalent of professional development workshops or sessions for teachers that can be done online at their discretion, and that these were geared specifically towards the psychological mechanisms we pinpointed in this school district that can contribute to racial inequity in school outcomes, namely through suspensions and expulsions and referrals to the intervention centers. In this first year after the randomized controlled trial, our plan was to make this completely voluntary, that teachers can participate in this program if they want to, and that they can receive professional development credit if they do. For the teachers that participated this year, they'll end up with an opportunity to receive more of this because we have in total, we've designed 3 so far, and there will be a 4th session that they can participate in. And so for the teachers that indeed already participated in 2 of these sessions last year, they will have the opportunity to participate in 2 additional sessions this year. For teachers that have not participated yet, they would be starting at the first session, and they will have the opportunity to go through the same regiment of programming. The difference is that in this initial year, it was voluntary, as I just described, and starting this fall, it will be mandatory for all teachers. This is an effort that I think is great on the part of the school district for both taking the time to be able to see the extent to which teachers will volunteer for this on their own, to just have that uptake in and of itself through interest, but then also doing the follow-up work necessary to indeed make sure that this is something that gets into the hands of all the teachers that it can potentially help and that it can potentially serve. An added benefit of doing it in this way is that we can see this. On their own accord, approximately 500 teachers, in my understanding that's almost half of the teachers in the school district, did this voluntarily. And those teachers will also be getting an additional 2 sessions this year. And that there's still room for more teachers to participate, and that is indeed what's going to be taking place. I believe their launch is scheduled for next month. I know, it's scheduled for next month. And so, actually, before the key findings, like I said, just as a reminder of what we found in the randomized controlled trial, we looked at a treatment condition that involved an empathic mindset on the part of teachers, and another set of teachers were randomly assigned to a control about how technology use is important for engaging students, something that is also beneficial but has not been scientifically found to mitigate race disparities in disciplinary action. It reduced suspension rates by 30% across 11 of your elementary schools. But a key thing to take away from what we're doing now is that now we're not following the actual administrative records. We're not actually following the suspension rates or the expulsion rates or things like that anymore. And it's because we don't have to. We found very strong effects, predictive validity, correlations between particular outcomes and those suspension rates. Those 2 things, key things, on the teacher side, it was teachers' satisfaction, actually. The more satisfied they were in their job, more specifically, the extent to which they agreed with the statement, I look forward to going to work when I wake up in the morning, their students were significantly less likely to be suspended across racial background. On the student side, students who felt that they were receiving more respect from adults at their school were less likely to end up suspended. Were less likely, it's not that they're less likely to get in trouble, it's that they're less likely to get suspended. Because as you all know, very likely, much better than I do, it's a given that children are gonna misbehave. And so what we focus on here are those two outcomes. Teachers' job satisfaction, specifically as it pertains to their relationships with students, and students' sense of teachers' respect. In the graphs or charts that I'm going to show you, we call that teacher caring. But just specifically, I brought my computer up so I could be specific. If it fell asleep, yep, not going to take the time to open it back up. But the specific question, as close as I can get it right now, is my teacher treated students with respect this week? And so it's just it's a very good psychological metric or a psychometric of what's going on in the moment for any given teacher from the perspective of students. And so those are two things that are indeed associated with the discipline records that you have coming out of the district. And there were two overall key findings. One, students, similar to what I was just saying, and we just have more evidence of it now, and so indeed we're on the right path. When teachers feel more satisfied in their jobs, indeed students felt more connected to their school. And so connected to their school has to do with a metric that we used in research across the country and the world. It's the idea that every human being has a fundamental desire to belong. And that is especially important for children and their development, especially in schooling, the sense of belonging they have where they are. And that's what we're finding here. And it's an interesting connection. The more teachers are satisfied with their jobs, the more students feel a sense of belonging. What makes it particularly interesting is that those things seem to be bidirectional, such that the other direction would also be effective. That when students feel more of a sense of belonging at school, teachers feel more satisfied in their job. And it's just a point that I hope to drive and push forward, is that these things are connected, and it's important to consider both in the bigger picture when approaching this issue. And then also the other key finding is that when teachers made a point of developing good relationships with their students indeed felt more of that teacher caring thing. That sense that a teacher treated them with respect on any given week, whatever week that was. And that is indeed something that in this school district was significantly correlated with indeed suspension rates, and that was something that the Latinx and Black students were less likely to feel. I'm sorry, I just changed what I say. I say Hispanic now, because I was told Latinx is not actually all-inclusive and make everyone happy. So the Hispanic and Black students tended to feel less respect from adults at their school, less of this teacher caring, and they were also more likely to be suspended from school. And it looks like, based upon what we're doing, it's going in a direction in which that is less likely the case when we think about all of the components together. Wouldn't be a true scientist if I didn't show you numbers and graphs. The takeaway from this graph are two things. One, develop relationships was one of those key findings I was talking about, and that is directly connected to the teacher caring, how students feel. And what you're seeing there is that 90% of the teachers sampled, whether they participated in the fall, which is the returning to TPP, or they participated in the spring, that's the new to TPP, you're looking at around 90% of teachers indeed saying or committing that they do that, and that's tied to indeed student outcomes. That's really impressive. And that, and most of the other graphs that you see there, is showing the same. Incredibly high levels of this thing. That other thing I was talking about, job satisfaction, you're seeing that is also a 90% agreement that teachers indeed feel satisfied in their job, happy to go to work in the morning. So this is incredibly promising. And to take a step back, as someone that works with a large number of school districts throughout the country now, as well as prisons and probation and parole, these type of numbers, they're impressive. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. And when we look at the graph to the left on empathy, that's not so promising. You're looking at best, about 73% of which, when we say empathy, it was the amount of agreement that teachers had with statements like, When a student is feeling distressed, I try to put myself in their shoes. That is a key thing that we have found, and we're talking publications in the National Academy of Sciences, Science Advances, as high up as science as we can go, that empathy on the part of teachers is something that offsets things like explicit and implicit bias that can indeed contribute to differences in suspension rates due to race, disability status, things of that nature. And so this is just to say, while 60% isn't horrible, there is room for improvement there. And again, for now, I think that the objective is to keep moving forward, keep following up on this, and we're going to keep administering this with more teachers, because a key thing is for that one, for empathy, I guess this isn't a laser pointer, that you're seeing a difference between the yellow bar and the green bar. And so I kind of skimmed over it, but the yellow bar is for teachers that were participating in this program for the first time last spring. The green bar are for teachers that participated last fall and last spring, and so they had done it twice. And what you're seeing is that teachers that are doing this multiple times, that have had multiple sessions in this type of empathic mindset approach, there is indeed a significant increase there. And so it's a trajectory that, for me, implies that, at least right now, and based on what we can see following the data, which is what I do, is that it's on a good path. Let's continue to see that rise to the level of the other ones that's more like 90%. This one is looking at the student's perspective. The takeaway here, I'm not going to spend too much time because it's a part of the key findings, this teacher caring thing and why it matters for suspensions and expulsions. The takeaway here is that something's going on in high school. And so we took a cohort of students in the 5th grade, 7th grade, and 10th grade in your school districts, because those have been known to be grade levels that are very predictive of future success based upon the different school levels. And as you can see, overall, similar to what I showed before, the green bar is higher than the yellow bar, showing that these things are getting better. But what's happening in 10th grade, while they are getting better, where they're starting is not an ideal place. And so we're starting to think about this now. We just analyzed this data and provided the reports in the last month or two. This is something that I'm thinking about. It does inform some recommendations I can have right now, which I have included in this slide deck, that essentially is, let's consider more of what's happening in 9th grade. When they're transitioning from middle school to high school, it's a new environment, it's a new stage in development, there's new biology happening with puberty, things of that nature, identity development, and there's a lot of room to do something there. But I'm going to come back to this because it seems like it's a different thing that's going on. But I'll come back to that. To make this point, which is a similar one, that across the things that we measured with students, it doesn't look as good in high school as it does in middle and elementary school. This allows us, this is a reason why I love science. We can get into the nitty-gritty and find out what's actually going on. It looks like y'all are doing well in elementary and middle school. It looks like you're not doing bad in high school, but that if you were going to target resources, if you're going to target efforts, that would be your room for improvement in our assessments. And so I've included the recommendations here. Of course, you already have this printed out and you can keep it with you. I'm not going to go over them now because I'd rather leave time for you all to ask any questions that you might have while I'm out here. Let me see, was there another? There's not. But back to that point. Well, there's two things I want to say before I conclude. One is back to that point about high school. I was recently contacted by the Attorney General's office of the state of New York about them facing some similar things as what you all were facing some years ago. And they want me to work with school districts throughout that state. And we have similar work with Illinois at this time. But the point being is that it appears to be the case that while the teacher-student relationship is a key component, and it makes a huge difference when we look at disparate impact on suspensions and expulsions, there does seem to be something to be said about peer-to-peer relationships. The acceptance question here is the extent to which they feel like they are accepted by their classmates, not by their teachers. And you're seeing the lowest scores there, such that there's something going on in the peer-to-peer relationships that could use some attention. And the recommendations I've given, oh, I see. I updated specifically this slide since I shared it, but I'll just tell you right now. There are indeed mindset interventions, some done by Carol Dweck, others by other advisors of mine, as well as some people down at UT Austin, David Yeager to be specific, and others that I can speak to, but I know their work very well. There are specific mindset approaches that are geared more specifically towards peer-to-peer interactions. For New York, it's all the way to the instance of hate crimes. I don't know if you all are having hate crimes here, but a similar vein, that something that from a mindset perspective that can be used to offset or mitigate the frequency or even occurrence of hate crimes should also help with peer-to-peer relations that can contribute to lacks of a sense of belonging, but also disproportionate discipline rates and things of that nature. And then the last thing I just wanted to touch on very quickly is I was able to get a look at some of the work that you all have been doing. Specifically, again, I had it on my computer, I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's your equity team.
Task force.
Task force. I just want to be clear, I don't get surprised often. I teach a lot of adolescents, hundreds right now. That just comes with pretty much expecting everything that you're going to see. That plan, of course, I just know it in theory. I've seen it through descriptions, summaries, slide decks, is some of the most impressive, thoughtful, mindful considerations that I've seen from a school district to date. That's both in California and all the way out to Florida and New York. I was blown away by just looking at some of the slides, and then I kept going through and I'm like, oh, y'all are doing all of these things? I just want to commend you all for, commend that team, whoever that team is, commend you all for whatever support or creation that you did for that team, because what they have put together, that is very impressive. It's not just good. It's borderline just the ideal, the best possible scenario. And I very much look forward to finding more out about how that's playing out, to the extent that I can, looking at it through a scientific lens of which components are effective, which can be tweaked. It's so much good stuff, from elevating students' voices through I'm forgetting the exact name of it, but it's like an advisory council. That was a part of one of the recommendations I made a year or two ago, and that is spot on. It provides children an opportunity to feel a sense of belonging because they can take ownership over their own experiences. They have agency in it. They have a say. They have a seat at the table. That, for anyone, even me, a grown CEO, professor, all of these things, when I feel like I'm heard, that makes my year. I have a 4-year-old, so it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's sweet. But then for everyone else, you all can be that much more effective when you indeed know what the students are thinking and feeling. And that is impressive. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just because you know them and you all were a part of this. But it's just so many elements of that, because there's the range from that to having principal trainings yearly, annually, to orient them to their relationships with teachers and students and equity and all of that, to engaging with parents, specifically parents of color, the forums that have been in place, the consultant or specialist that was put on that. And one of my favorite one is what was it? I don't remember the exact term, but it's like equity evaluations, equity audits. I don't remember if that was my recommendation or not, but wow.
Take credit for it.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I don't want to take up you all's time. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you or all of you may have. Thank you.
So, Dr. Aquanafa, I have to say, in this day and age, where we don't hear much of what we're doing right, it's awesome and encouraging to hear these words from you. We've worked really hard to make these things happen, and it's so encouraging to know that the hard work that everyone has put in is making a difference. So I thank you for this report. I'd like to start by going out to the public for any comments. Ms. Martinez?
Thank you, Dr. O. You just completed like 10 years of my job. My name is Debbie Martinez, and I will, under this part of the umbrella, be part of the Advocate for Justice team. That was the legal team that helped take us parents to federal courts, that kindly brought this gentleman to this governing board along to this district. I had been screaming school to prison pipeline. I had been screaming foul play, and now we have somebody that came in by federal courts, I'm only going on record now, to even the playing field. Yes, I see improvement. Yes, I see the needle moving in the right direction, but it shouldn't have had to take federal courts to do it. And the one that challenged me was you, Homero, when you told me to get to legislation. So we're there. So now that we're there, I used to be on the task force. Tim, Mark, community would still like to be invited, since we were the ones that started this almost 7 years ago. So we would still like to sit at that table, and we would still like to give our opinions and our suggestions to all of this as well. So don't leave us out. We were the ones that got you here. Okay? So in saying all that, my questions are, how many more years will it take before we actually see results from the educators? That's kind of a tough question. I know you don't have the answer, but I'm just putting it out there to the governing board. That would be one. Number two is, what happens to those educators that are tenured that don't want to make change? That the power of the pen continues to put our children in the gap of this prison pipeline, where they end up at that bogus military school where they clearly said they're not setting them up for armed force, they're setting them up to take their commands in juvenile hall. So what happens to those educators that are tenured out, that refused to continue to better serve our children? What's going to be done to those educators? Is there any, our children get in trouble, they get suspended, they get expelled. Are educators going to do that? Are they going to get it suspended or expelled for their bad behavior? That would be one question that we're still looking for. And the next one would be empathy. 60%, that should have been 100. Our children come to school that are fostered out. I do foster care. Our children come to school homeless, and they look for empathy. They crave for empathy. I speak for the moms and dads that come out of state and federal prisons. Those children don't get empathy. Here is where it should begin. I'd like to see that number go up, along with the transitioning and the 9th grade. And I've been screaming this. They come from Empire, 8th grade, full of hopes and full of dreams. They come into Johansson, Miss West, this is you now, and that's where the pipeline begins. And I'm repeatedly out there. My poor little Isaiah was victimized out there. We need to clean up that site when it comes to stereotyping our children with the educators out there. And so those are just comments, and my number one would be the educators, the ones that are tenured. That's my question. How do they get reprimanded and disciplined? Thank you, Dr. O.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the public? Yes.
I guess I'm playing devil's advocate here, because all of this is still new to me, this concept of equity. And I did talk to Fallon about it, and she's educating me. I do have a hopefully soon phone call with Dr. Nelson to understand about equitable grading, because I don't understand equitable grading, because to me grading should be, hey, you get the assignment, you go home, you study, take the test, that's the result. So I'm still trying to understand what this is. But going back to Dr. O's comment about, or finding of high schoolers not finding acceptance, that's just high school. It's really hard to feel accepted in high school. And thank God when I was in high school, social media did not exist, because that just exacerbates everything. So I think that a lot of what was presented is just kind of, well, of course that makes sense. If the teachers enjoy what they're doing, then the children are going to benefit. If the children are receiving attention and care, then it's a symbiotic relationship. But I guess what I'm saying is that it's a lot of the parents' responsibility. And I do feel for the students who are homeless, who are in foster care. I saw the data, the numbers on those students, and it is very low, thank God. But a lot of it is the responsibility of us as parents. And I don't know how much responsibility is truly your responsibility to ensure that the children are going to be successful. And I think that's the problem with our society today, is that we're telling the government, you need to make things better for us, when really as a society, it's the nucleus, the home, the family. That's where we really need to ensure that the parents are there to support their kids, to ensure that they're going to be able to succeed in school and succeed after school also. So I'm still learning about equitable grading. Sounds like this has been going on for 7 years. There's been stuff going on. But again, high school. High school's tough, and it doesn't help with social media. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't know how you get rid of the phones. They get them when they're 10. It's kind of scary.
Thank you. Do we have, yes?
I'm new to this, and I'm jumping right in. All right, so I also have a little bit of what she said. I mentioned that I have a 10th grader at Downey. 4.0 consistently since 8th grade. He works really hard to manage those grades. It's 4.8. So he straight A's, A pluses, straight A's. And he catches heck when he doesn't get an A. Because I always tell him, his parents always tell him, you've done this to yourself. You can't go down. You can only go up. But it is the family's responsibility. Mom, dad, grandparents, aunties, uncles, we used to have that family nucleus when I was in school. I imagine you guys all too. And the school system and teachers now have to be psychologists and social workers and part-time parents. It's too much. The parents have to hold responsibility for their own families and their own children. And I think that a kid that doesn't try with this equitable grading system, we opted out of it. We didn't even put our boy in it because he needs a letter grade, our little girl too. But for those that, I'll give you an example. At John Muir, my grandson was a perfect attendance, got the medal every year. The last year he was there, kids that missed 3 days of school also got perfect attendance. What was the point? Everybody gets an achievement. You can't do that. Kids have to work hard for grades, and they shouldn't have any kind of equity. That's my opinion, and there I go.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to comment at this time? See none. I have lights from our board, and the first one I saw was Vice President Lopez, and then Trustee Irvin, and then Trustee Maestas.
Yeah, so my question is going to be for Dr. O. I'll give you a second, but I just want to say thank you for the report, and thank you to everyone that has at one point or other helped to where we're at. As I mentioned before, we're moving the needle. But we're moving, right? And that's the important thing. Hopefully one day we see the no white gaps, right? On that. But that's why we have to stay vigilant. We have to continue to do the work. One question I did have, and maybe I wasn't understanding this right, when it comes to the graph around teacher caring, you mentioned and you focused on 10th grade. But if I'm reading this right, there's 7th grade is where the highest, where students don't feel that the teacher's investing into developing a relationship with a student. So am I reading that correctly? And if so, why is still the focus on 10th grade as a something to illustrate?
I apologize. I sped through this graph. The y-axis or the vertical axis, the percentages, the higher up you go, is the more respect that they feel. And so for 10th graders, it's the lowest. For 7th graders, it's the highest. So it appears that middle school is doing the best, and that is consistent with the previous work we did with the district. But seriously, to your credit, I didn't explain this well. And so the higher up you're on that graph is the more that students feel respected based upon what teachers said about whether or not they focus on developing relationships. And so we're bringing together two different perspectives, two different data sets to bear on one question of just how are they connected. And so I apologize, but that's what's going on there. That the 7th grade is the best case scenario relative to other school levels.
Got it. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Yes.
Trustee Irvin?
Yes, Dr. O. Also, thank you for the report and the follow-up and your comments and positive comments and our acknowledging, again, as President West said, and we hear a lot of the negativity, but very rarely we get that. Hey, you guys are doing some things. You're moving in the right direction, and so we like to know that the needle is not going the other direction or just stagnant there. So knowing that we're moving in the right direction, and also this advocacy and community activism actually started with back in 2004 with Dr. Parker out of the University of Kentucky, who was also a social scientist as yourself. Back in the day, and then things just kind of stagnant, and then community got reinvigorated, and said, hey, this stuff is still happening, and hence here we are with you. And so it's really good to see and hear that the needle is moving in the right direction. I would just like to say, add, if it is a possibility, future presentation, if we could have like maybe a synopsis and a summary, because there may be people, you got new parents coming into the district, new staff, they can kind of see, and the public, as we hear video, it could have got an idea what this is all about in terms of why are we reporting on this, because there'll be some that wasn't here during that time. And then I wanted to ask about your the 30% change in suspension. Was that pre-COVID versus currently, or okay?
Fortunately, due to you all's timing,
right,
you can
right
say it was done on purpose, but right before the pandemic,
right before the pandemic
is what that 30% reduction was reflecting. Yeah, sorry. So that's the answer to that question, and then. These results are in the thick of the pandemic. And so when we get the results from this fall, next spring, what I think something that's coming with your question, we will be able to understand relative differences of change before the pandemic, during the pandemic, after the pandemic, which will have predictive validity moving forward. Yeah, thanks for that question. Also just want to point out to, so thanks for that feedback. I will keep a note of this and make sure I do that summarizing before and for right now, just to place that 30%. I did that randomized controlled trial for you all in plans that we had for each other. I am a tenure track professor, and I wish I could publish that. It's you all's data, it's you all's randomized controlled trial, it's you all's results. But I just want you to know, personally, I would be able to get that published in the top scientific journals, and the whole nation would be like, oh my gosh, that's a real world outcome that was changed for elementary school children. I'm saying that not to say that you all don't recognize, I'm just like, okay. Okay. But yeah, that was before the pandemic.
Right. And that, to me, that actually has extra meaning for that, that 30%, given the pandemic and given what all of our students are going through during this very, trying time for them academically and socially and things like that, for them to really place an emphasis on that teacher caring, can speak volumes in itself during this time. And then just the last thing is, I always say this, but we hear about equity. I'm just looking for that day in education where we don't have to use that word equity, that we only be using it in an economic sense as the equity in your home and the equity in your 401k plan, not in education. So hopefully we'll be able to get there one day in life, but I never want to have to be in a position where we can say we're unequitable, that we don't have equity in our students, in their future. So that's the day I'm looking for. Thank you again.
I didn't know. Oh, I'm sorry. Talking out of order. I know how these meetings go. I'm sorry.
No, please comment, then I'm going to go to the next.
It was actually I'm like a president of a law firm. Question of order, clarity. Would
I will allow it,
answer
yes.
all the questions that were asked, or?
I think you'll answer the board members' questions as we get to them.
Okay.
That's what we'd like you to do.
Okay.
We're going to go next to Trustee Maestas, then Trustee Marks, then Trustee Brown.
Thank you. I'm actually going to make this pretty quick. So thank you, Dr. O, for this. As a statistics teacher and math teacher, you speak my language. So thank you for all of this. I love looking into data, and it just it speaks to me. And one thing that we're going to see later on when we look at all the report on the student outcomes data is that these data that you present are reflective in some of the data that we're going to see later too. So one part. So I have two, really, they're more comments than questions. The first is the relationships. When I was a first-year teacher, I was taught, high school, teaching 9th and 10th grade, I was taught, no emotion, be hard. And now I work with teachers and talk about building culture and relationship and agency, because you want to build a team before you want to build be hard, right? So there's just a different focus, I think, when you get in there and get those kids being part of something, especially when it's bigger than them, right? The only part I have a little bit of worry on this empathy piece. This is what, about 60%, and that's from voluntary teachers.
That is, yeah.
I'm very curious to see what that percentage is when we get all the teachers. I'm also curious to see the split between elementary and high school and junior high in that particular spot, empathy. I have a sense, I think, that what the data are going to show on that, but I'm interested in knowing if there's a difference between the percentages among, in this empathy piece, in elementary teachers and in secondary teachers. So maybe those data, if you can share them at some point, I'd be interested in that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, so quickly, thanks for that. The analyses that you were interested in, that shouldn't be a problem. Is it okay if I get it to Mr. Herbst and he, yeah, okay. And then, yeah, just quickly your comment. Yeah, so you saw the same thing I did. And just for everyone else, the point about empathy is very important, and perspective needs to be paid. The teachers that volunteer to participate are likely your teachers that have the most empathy already, because they were seeking out on their own ways to improve their relationships with teachers. That being at like 60 is not, it's not a good sign. And what you're, I think what you're predicting, I have the same prediction that those numbers are going to be lower for the data we collect this year. So just acknowledging that, yes, that's right.
Thank you. Trustee Marks?
So I'll make my statement and then I will ask a question. To your point about the Equity and Racial Justice Committee, I think in the many times we have done a lot of talking about what needs to be done. But this committee, through the leadership of Dr. Naguchi, she said she wanted to make sure we had actionables at the end of the sessions that we did after the months of work that we did together as a committee. And that's what we came up with. We had 6 actionables, and she wanted them to be measurable because then we could actually track them and ensure that they were accomplished in our district. And I thought that was really helpful because that way we can see where it's going to go and what happens. And then we have already implemented some of them and are on the way to implementing more of them. So I just really appreciate the direction that the leadership has taken on this after serving on the Dr. Parker Committee many years ago in 2001 or 2 when it started and all the way till now. Just would like to see those changes happen. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And then my question for you is, I cannot recall if the students that we are surveying, are they certain student groups? Is it the whole population of students, or remind me? So
It was across the board. It's not a specific racial or gender group. It's representative of the overall, for example, 7th grade.
okay, that's what I thought. But then I thought, well, maybe this is only a small percentage or small pocket of students. Okay, that's great, and that helps because as we do this and as our population changes in our school district, it's really good for students to really respect one another. I like that you use the word respect because when I came on the board in '97, that was something that we had talked about as a community. We had the word tolerance was the main word at that time. And when we hired someone to come out to help us work through some of the community issues that were going on at that time, he brought up that the point that no one wants to be tolerated, but we'd like to be respected. And I thought that was a great vocabulary to change to because we want to be respectful to one another and feel respected. And so when you talked about that in this, that really stood out to me as something that's really important for our students to recognize and our teachers to respect the students that they're working with and the students to respect the teachers. So I think it's really good to see the relationships building in that way and the positive results that are coming about because of doing some of this training. So it gives us hope for the future and to see our school district changing in this way. So thank you for for taking us on, because we had to do that together and then to work together. So I appreciate that.
Indeed, and just very quickly, again, I've been happy to work with you all. As I first started working with you all, Mark met my daughter when she was not even 1 year old.
Right, yeah.
Now she's going to be entering TK next fall. But I wanted to quickly say, yes, what you just said seems to indeed be exactly what the students and the teachers are feeling, that it's around that respect component both ways.
Yeah.
And I imagine principals and school leadership feel the same. Then I quickly also wanted to say that with the team and the work that you've done, and of course, Dr. Naguchi, the equity and grading really seemed really interesting and really forward-thinking for me. And so I just really wanted to very quickly, while I'm here, and I can tell you, that is incredibly sound. What we know very well from experimental scientific research is that if you ask a girl her gender before she takes a test, she will underperform compared to if you didn't ask her for her gender before she took that test, because of salient known stereotypes, all the way up to the president of Harvard University saying that women have limited brain capacity, to just regular watching of television and things of that nature that say that women can't do science or STEM. Just the idea of the thing took otherwise, and they experimentally manipulated this. Without that prompt at the beginning, women outperformed, or the girls outperformed the boys on that math and science test. And that just as a small and very, very well-respected, rigorous line of research that existed for a number of decades, yes, equity and grading is going to be very important because those things exist and they're real. And so I commend you all for that type of thinking. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I pointed that out as well.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Trustee Brown?
Yes, Dr. Klenofa, I don't know if you were here for the portion of our board meeting when our student representative spoke.
I heard about the volleyball team.
Okay. One of the things that you need to know about our district is the power of our inter-high council and the work that our leadership students and students that work together across the district the power that they have to influence the actions of the rest of the student body. So I was thinking of that as you talked about the peer-to-peer acceptance issues that we need to address now. And I'm very curious to find if there are some best practices that you can help share with us, because I know our leaders among the students, and I believe in their ability to change behaviors among themselves. Bring them back to us, because I know we've got the tools to help them help each other.
Similar to what you're saying, I would say immediately what comes to mind, the most scalable approach and effective one is one in which you indeed, it's not a trickle-down effect, but rather it's a leader setting examples type of thing. And when you're thinking about high school, middle school, I research this stuff a lot, so it's like top of my mind, but it's like if you think back to that time, it's like it's their whole world. And when there's a student leader, that is really seen as some staple, someone to believe in and look to, but also someone that is very much respected. And so the extent to which the message can be communicated that these are the findings, this is something we want to work on, and potentially directly working with them to brainstorm solutions, but then also to just share with them things that have worked in this district or other districts, that will likely go a long way to disseminate to the entire rest of the student body. In the slides, I included, oh yeah, right, I didn't update it. But at a high level, working on that sense of acceptance, but I will share after this specifically solutions to do so. There's, for example, intervention work that looks at the malleability of personality. This was work done by David Yeager at UT Austin and Carol Dweck at Stanford that showed that when students understand other students' malleability, specifically bullies, that bullies can change. Bullies aren't always going to be bullies, and that bullies are humans. It might sound backwards or counterintuitive to be thinking of it in that way, but when that happens, the otherwise victims of the bullying feel empowered. And they, in turn, lead bullies to be less likely to bully because it doesn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. They're seen beyond some big bad person with like hateful speech or something of that nature, but rather like this person could use, some guidance or some help or something of that nature, and that changes the outcome. But then there's also research specifically on belonging uncertainty that has mitigated. Specifically, this came out in 2019. I was one of the authors on it. It was tested in middle schools. It mitigated racial disparities and referrals to the office to increase students' sense of belonging at school. And so it will take a while to explain all that, but it's very promising work. It's very new. And they actually found that when they followed up on that data many years later, that the effects lasted beyond their actual K through 12 education, such that they were less likely to be sick after graduating from high school. All that to say, I think it's a great idea to think about the student leaders, and I think they will likely be very receptive to ways that they can really use their position to do some of the change they hope to see in the world.
I also want to just state to the public that some of the most powerful presentations that we've had in our public presentations are those that have come to us from our students.
I don't take offense to that.
No, this isn't this period of public presentation. I'm not downplaying your presentation in any means, but what I'm saying is that it's great to hear their voices, hear their concerns, hear their suggestions, and I'm proud to say that we've listened and that we've implemented a lot of those suggestions, and we hear what their needs are, and especially since we've got well-represented students on that have been part of our board team. And so we love to hear any ideas that you have for us that can strengthen that role for the student leadership.
Sounds good. We'll do, and I'll be checking out these the outcomes as well, and continuing conversations with Dr. Naguchi as well as Mr. Hurst, as well as Mr. Goodell. We're still talking, yeah. But yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Trustee Maestas mentioned that you spoke his language as a statistics teacher. And I have to say, as a middle school counselor, I think you're bilingual because you're speaking my language as well. I have a passion for all of this, and so I really appreciate this report. I had one question on page 2. What is variable teaching? What do you mean by that?
Yes. It was responses to questions that I changed my curriculum to fit the needs and experiences of my students. That has been found to be beneficial specifically to Hispanic and Black students, but also recent immigrant students and American Indian or Native American students, because what appears to be the norm or what is typical is a situation in which the approach to pedagogy and curriculum does not include things that would be beneficial or useful to them. And so that's why we asked that question. And it appears that your teachers are high on this, that they, despite the fact that there are rules in place for what they need to teach, that they are still seeking out and thinking about ways to adapt it.
Thank you. I want to touch base quickly on the transition. This seems to be a big thing, and a couple of our public members had mentioned also the transition from junior high school to high school. You know, I worked at a middle school for many years, and so I know that that's difficult. We do have a lot of students that are feeding in from other districts, so I wonder if that has anything to do with that. But I would love to see what we can do. I know we do a lot in our high schools, the days that we have before school. Every high school calls them something different, where we welcome our incoming students and do a whole day. But I just feel maybe there's a little bit more we can do to welcome our ninth grade students, to try to help them feel most comfortable at high school, because it is a difficult transition. And then I want to touch really quickly also on the empathy piece. And, you know, we showed that a lot of our teachers, these voluntary teachers who took this, had a little bit of low empathy. I want us to remember that last year, last fall, and last spring, our teachers were in survival mode. And I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that their empathy for the students may have been a little bit low, because they were struggling to learn, you know, all the new devices and how to teach online and how to teach concurrently with our students at home and our students here. And I know that was a little bit, you know, that's from the past as well. But our teachers they've been in a state of survival for the last couple of years. And so I just wonder if that had any effect on that empathy level.
There's some things we'll be able to do statistically when we get the data from this fall and next fall. This fall and the spring, looking at it comparatively. But your point is absolutely valid. And similar to what Mr. Irvin said about that time period, it's also bi-directional, such that unfortunately, when that was happening, when teachers were in survival mode, fortunately, students were too.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a time in which they were probably seeking and wanting empathy more than ever. And the thing is, and I think what comes with the framing that you're placing is that there was nothing any of us could do about some of that. But we'll see the extent to which that differs with more data. But just as a reminder, it is promising, because the green bar is higher than the yellow bar. It's something that does show improvement with multiple sessions.
Thank you. This has been a great report. Thank you so much for the patience. Oh, we have our student rep. Awesome. And then after we're done with this, I'd like to take a break. I think we all need a little bit of a break. So, Ms. Banaka?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I want to thank you for this incredibly insightful report. I learned so much from this report, and I think that, like, just in general, having good data is how you make good decisions on all levels of policy. And so I really appreciate the time that you put into this to really narrow down these results to some really insightful recommendations. And I hope that it's not just us as a board that gains from this, but I hope that teachers see this as well and can learn from this and implement that into their classrooms. And I hope that students see it as well and can learn from this data and implement that into their school lives. Just building off the point of student voice and empowerment, I totally agree. I used to be really shy as a kid, and I remember how that felt to be the quiet kid in the back of the class that, you know, no teacher really cared to hear from. And so I think that even with the student voice councils in many high school districts, I think it's important to be aware of the fact that we don't want to just listen to the students who are naturally outgoing, the students who are, you know, straight A students, all AP, all IB. We want to listen to the students at the back of the class as well, and that's something I think our district does well. You know, we talked about the Student Advisory Council. I was on that last year, and I truly saw a completely different set of voices that I never saw in any of the other councils that I had been in, because it really focused on listening to those students that typically were not given those leadership positions, that weren't at the front of the line, you know? And so I think that, you know, when you go to all those different school districts, I think it's important to keep that in mind, and to keep in mind who we're targeting and who we're listening to, because it often can feel like for those students that their voice doesn't matter. And so I think making a point to reach out to them specifically can be really, really helpful. But overall, I really appreciated this presentation. I think we can all learn a lot from it.
Thank you. You used to be shy, really? I don't. No. Seriously, in all seriousness, thank you. We try to be on the right track, and I remembered Chairwoman West, President
Charlene,
West, Dr. Okay, Charlene. All the above. I remember that you also made a comment about the transition from middle school to high school. I will provide some more information about what's been tried and true for peer-to-peer interactions at that transition, and it has to do with creating context in which the students have to rely on each other. In order to get an A, and every student has their own piece of the puzzle. They have information that the whole group's not going to do well unless they get inclusion and cooperation from everyone in the group. Those type of situations cross lines of disability status, racial status, things of that nature. Those are the type of things. Yeah, so I'll think about that specifically and be in touch about it.
I would appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you again for the excellent report. I would like to take a break until 8:10. That gives us 13 minutes. Thank you.
Not anymore. I used to, but now we go straight to the district. Good to see you again. Where's Oh, I remember you.
I've been doing this for federal law attorney for legislation in Washington, D.C. My mom.
I know, right?
Thank you so much.
This is great.
As we come back to our meeting, we're moving on to item B5, which is the report on student outcomes, and this is Mr. Godot.
Good evening, Board President Dr. West, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Dr. Naguchi, Cabinet, and members of the public. It's my pleasure this evening to bring to you a report on student outcomes. Historically, we present to the board on an annual basis a board report on student outcomes. We're going to share some data with you this evening in a number of different areas. I'd like to preface this evening's presentation before we begin with a few things. First off, I want to thank our team that you're going to meet through the presentation. We've got 5 people presenting this evening the data to you. They've done a lot of work on this, and I just want to recognize that effort. I'd also like to point out that some of the data was impacted by COVID. I mean, we know that. Dr. Naguchi spoke to that at the beginning of the board meeting, and Dr. Contreras and Mr. Reynolds, I think, will frame some more of that in more detail as we go through the presentation. Additionally, I'd also like to point out that there were a few revisions made to the PowerPoint for this evening's presentation that are slightly different than what was posted in the agenda on Friday. Most of that was basically the graphics of the charts that were adjusted, and there was some information, longitudinal data that was added to Ms. Maricela-Mota's LPAC summative data to help provide a deeper picture of what the data looked like over the last 3 years as opposed to just this year's data. So with that, Mr. Reynolds, if we go to the next slide. So the purpose of this evening's presentation is to provide the board with an update on student achievement and outcomes. We're going to start by telling our story, giving you an update of our enrollment. Ironically, we also have Mr. Zierli giving an update on enrollment this evening, as well as our story around COVID and what's happened over the last year and a half, just to kind of refresh our memory of what that lens has looked like. We'll discuss and present to you our 4-year graduation cohort outcomes, which includes our graduation data, dropout data, and a few other key areas. We'll share with you our California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. You often hear that referred to as CASP assessment or tests. And then we have our AP and IB programs, Advanced Placement and International Baccalaureate data. We'll follow that up with some summative English Learner Proficiency Assessment data, which is for our English learners. And then we'll finish with our state seals of biliteracy and state seal of civic engagement. Next slide, please. So our presentation this evening aligns with District Goals 1.1, ensuring great instruction first time, 1.2, looking at how we can increase students being identified as prepared in the college career indicators, as well as increasing students being identified as prepared in the college and career indicators. I think that's repetitive. And 1.3, English learner growth toward English proficiency. And lastly, increasing regular two-way communication with our stakeholders. And I really want to point out that the reason for sharing this data, as Dr. O demonstrated, and I think Dr. Naguchi's mission, is that we are using data to drive our decisions, and that we're transparent with that data, acknowledging where we have rooms to grow and acknowledging the places that we've done well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ryan Reynolds, Director of Assessment and Evaluation, to begin with our story of enrollment data.
All right. Thank you. You know, a little side note, Mr. Zierli and I have a little competition going on who's going to be more interesting with the enrollment data. So I'm going to earn that candy bar. All right. So today we'll begin by reviewing some of our internal enrollment data to get a sense and scope of the student groups we serve. Later this evening, as I just noted, you'll hear a more focused report on enrollment by Mr. Zierli. So for this report, I'll just paint a general enrollment picture of our district to tell our story. As we all know, our district is increasingly diverse. Though these numbers do not include preschool, you can see here that our largest student group in terms of federal ethnicity is Hispanic or Latino at 66%. The next largest is white at 18%. Two or more races is a group which continues to grow in size as families identify multiple ethnicities on their enrollment cards. They represent 5%, while African American and Asian students represent approximately 3 to 4% respectively. Depends on if you round or not, right? So looking at some of our other student groups, you can see that the majority of our students are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And roughly a quarter of our students are English learners. A tenth of our students are students with disabilities, and all student groups show a decline in size, which mirrors the overall decrease in enrollment. I should also note that these student group counts fluctuate considerably until we certify our counts in December each year for state reporting. For example, a great deal of outreach, legwork, and one-on-one family communication takes place in order to find students experiencing homelessness. So those numbers tend to go up. Here we look at the same data, but through the lens of a 3-year trend. Most student groups have maintained their proportional representation in our district, though we have seen a continued incremental increase in the Hispanic Latino population and a decrease in the white population. Again, with these numbers being sourced from the internal counts prior to our December certification, socioeconomically disadvantaged, homeless, and foster counts fluctuate as families' LCFF income forms are processed and student records are updated. Needless to say, low-income families represent a majority of our students at over 70%, and our English learner population continues to increase. You know, I think we can all agree that given the challenges our students have faced in the last 2 years, demographics are only one part of their story. Dr. Heather Contreras is here to share more of that story with you this evening.
While Dr. Contreras is coming up, I forgot to mention that we did include some additional slides in the presentation for the public posted agenda, specifically some enrollment slides as well as some CASP data that we did not intend to share. So if you're following along at home, maybe on the slide deck or out here with a copy, we are intentionally just moving past all those slides, but including it for the public to see the data. Sorry. Dr. Contreras.
Taking my time, Mr. Giddo? Huh. So as you can see on the slide that's showing right now, when COVID hit us in March of 2020, it was a really tough time for everybody. It was hard to imagine that we were closing our schools. We didn't think we'd be closing them for very long, and then that dragged on. But our teachers just did a spectacular job of immediately beginning to innovate and think about how they could outreach to their students. And so that slide really demonstrates some of the innovative thinking that they were doing just around connecting with students, knowing that the students were at home, they weren't seeing their teacher, this is a scary time. But they really went outside the box and did all sorts of things with technology that they were just learning. And that was just in the first couple of weeks of COVID. So on March 17th, that was the day that distance learning began. And that was our mad rush to get all the devices into the hands of students. And if you remember back in the early days, it was connecting families to internet, Wi-Fi. How are we going to reach them with these devices when there was a shelter-in-place order happening? How are we going to feed our families and our students? There were a lot of things that had to be thought through and a lot of things that we were reacting to that were even beyond just the educational and academic environment. So those are really, I think of them as the dark days, because they were, but we had so many things in place as a district that allowed us to be able to react swiftly and quickly. And some of those things were the creation of our CIPD department. We didn't have that the year before. Thank goodness we had that in March of 2020, because that allowed us to right away get packets of work to students so they could attempt to continue in their education. We had a fantastic IETS department that was able to motivate quickly and get devices in the place, and a stellar lunch program that really was able to motivate right away, and there was no lapse in feeding our students at that time. So that was the beginning of our journey, and then things got lifted a little bit, and we were able to bring our students back. But when we brought them back, it was to a very different environment than one we've ever experienced before. And it's important to remember that, because all of those things really impacted not just academics, but it also impacted social and emotional well-being. And if social and emotional well-being isn't in place, it's really hard to reach that academic piece as well. So we came back to social distancing. We had plexiglass. We still have plexiglass. And we were outreaching to people outdoors as much as possible. So just a little reminder, too, of all of the adaptability and flexibility that happened, not just for our teachers and our staff, but for our parents and for our students. So we started out in full distance learning. We then moved into having learning hubs, and that's where we were bringing identified students back under the letter of the law at the time. We were then able to bring students back, but in hybrid model, and we had to have A and B cohorts because the thoughts at the time were not to intermingle students to really continue to slow that spread. We then were able to combine our cohorts. And then we continued, though, at that time to have hybrid teaching because distance learning was still an option for families who didn't feel comfortable bringing their students back to school. So we really went through 4 variations of learning from March of 2020 to today. So this year we are traditional, and we have students who can opt for digital learning through the Modesto Virtual Academy. I think one of our biggest challenges at this moment in time are our quarantines. We do have students and staff who are in quarantine situations because COVID does exist still. And then instruction during the pandemic was a challenge. As beautifully as our teachers did and engaged and thought outside of the box and learned new models for teaching, it is still a difficult platform, and our students say that too, that learning through a computer is not the same as being in person. So with that, and kind of keeping in mind where we've been, we are going to begin presenting some of the outcomes that we've seen over the last year. And so Lori Hewlin is going to start with our 4-year graduation cohort outcomes.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be here. We had a great job, Ryan. Ryan framed for us who we're talking about, and Dr. Contreras framed for us kind of what's been happening over the past couple of years. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our 4-year graduate cohort outcomes. We have some good news to celebrate, as well as some areas that we have identified as needing support. In a year-over-year comparison, the district overall did not change in graduation rate. However, we did see an increase at 3 high schools, most notably a 10.9% increase in graduation at Elliott. When looking at our dropout rate, we want the rate to decrease, and as a district, that rate did decrease by 2.2%, so definitely good news. We also had 6 schools decrease in their percent of students. Most noticeable were Davis with a 6.4% decrease and Elliott with an 11.9% decrease. When looking at other outcomes for our graduates, we notice that as a district, our percentage of students that graduated meeting UC and CSU requirements declined by 1.2. However, Bayer, Davis, Enox, and Johansson did see increases in graduates meeting those requirements. Other news to celebrate is that our overall percent of graduates that met the state seal of biliteracy requirements increased by 1.9%, with 6 schools also experiencing an increase. A highlight is Downey with an 8.6% increase. Ms. Moda will be providing more information on this data later in the presentation. Looking at our students with earning a Golden State Seal Merit Diploma, we had an overall decrease of 1.2%. However, we did have 4 schools see an increase. We recognize that not all schools increased in these outcome areas, and we are working with those schools this year. Looking again at the 3 areas of focus, graduation rate, our graduates meeting UC and CSU requirements, and graduates earning the Golden State Seal Merit Diploma. But this time we look at our graduates by student groups. When we look at these student groups, we see that 3 groups increased in all 3 areas and 2 groups increased in 2 areas. When we look at that same data with a different student group, we see that the foster youth had a significant 15.2% increase in graduation rate. Other student groups did not see such growth, with many seeing a decrease across one or more of the outcomes, and we will be working with schools to address the needs of student support. And now Dr. Contreras is going to review CASP data.
Hello, me again. So I want to front load the CASP data with just one caveat. In the spring of 2020, we did not have statewide testing because of the pandemic. And there were many, many principals at the site, as well as at the district level, who really lamented that we didn't get that data, because we were so sure that so many of the strategies we were using at the time were going to show great results. So there was like a mourning period of not having that assessment. And so now we're looking towards that assessment. There's some pieces, we could not control for at all. Students, some of them were allowed to take them at home. We brought students back as much as possible, but ones who were still in the distance learning environment were maybe hard to get to, so not all of our students were assessed. And then when they were assessed, the testing environment was just very different. So this was a hard piece for us. However, I think we're looking at it more now as a baseline. Okay, here's what our students are performing at, and here's where we need to go from here. So keep that in mind as we go on to the next parts of the CASP. So the CASP assessment is the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. It's administered, like I just mentioned, in the spring of each school year, measures student achievement in ELA and in math, and it was waived, like I said, in the spring of 2020, much to our chagrin. That's a pretty awesome statement, really, because you're in the right place when you are like, bring this test on, we're ready for it, and that was the feeling that we had. So that was a big loss for us. The assessment requirements for the spring of 2021 did allow, like I said, for in-person and remote testing. So we didn't have complete control of the testing environment like we would have normally. There was not a strict mandate this past year for students to test, mainly because the state did acknowledge the challenges there. We had a smaller participation rate than compared to previous years. The only scores that were represented were overall scores. So all times with the CASP, we get a breakdown of the subscores that give us more detailed information about how a student is performing in different parts of ELA and math. And that allows us to design more specific interventions or to just understand our own instruction better. So we did not get that type of information this year. The CAST science test was not administered, and the California Alternative Assessment for Special Education students was very challenging. Those assessments are one-to-one, and because of the nature of how we had to assess, that was a very challenging assessment to give. So some of the accuracy of that assessment could not be as valid as in prior years. So we have some key findings that stood out for us. One is that, like I said, the overall scores were just overall scores. We didn't get the claimed sub-scores. They weren't released. That gives us a little bit of a lack of information on this accountability measure. We do not have the CAST science test, like I said earlier. The special education assessment is going to be harder to judge where our students were at and know exactly how to respond to that. And then both districts saw a significant decline in the students' test scores overall, which is to be expected. We noticed that our student achievement in ELA consistently outperformed math, and that is consistent with prior years. Students with disabilities didn't demonstrate growth over the last 3 years. English learner performance has not shown any growth. Our English learners were very challenged because learning language through a distance learning environment is not the best. It limits language right because of the format that it's in. That students aren't talking to each other, they're not on the playground talking to each other, so that was kind of to be expected. Our African Americans showed a significant achievement gap in ELA and math, and our reclassified fluent English proficient group scored considerably better than our EOs or our other ELL groups. So our next steps include our multi-tier system of support across all of our K-6 sites. A multi-tier system of support is an intervention support that includes many different facets of educating children. So that also includes social emotional learning and services that we have in place to address that. It includes interventions in reading language arts as well as math. Some different strategies like intercession and summer school programs, Saturday school. It really means multi-tier and that there's a lot of pieces in place and different levels that we're looking at addressing students, including enrichment. We have an ELA coaching model, and we're looking at letters training. Letters training is language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. And that training is for K-6 teachers and admin. Actually, this week, all of our administrators in the K-6 will be participating in that training. I'm really excited about it too. And so are they. It's a really good training, and most people who have attended it to date say, I wish I had had this years and years ago. It's very well received. Our 712 teachers who teach English language arts, English, have also been invited to attend those trainings as well. We have our SWAN math model, which has been wildly successful. Our teachers report seeing their students performing much better in math. They feel incredibly supported with the curriculum and the coaching model that exists within it. It's been very well received. From that, we also developed a similar model for 712. SWAN is K-8, although we do have a junior high school that is not using the SWAN model, but we developed a math ambassadors model that really kind of mimics the support of SWAN. And then we have robust special education trainings for teachers and staff. And actually, just as I was coming down to this board meeting, we had a group of special education teachers engaging in professional development right across the street. And it sounded like they were having a lot of fun and having some great discussions around how to support students. So some of our other next steps include our Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, also known as SIOP, and that's a wonderful training for teachers to engage in different strategies that they can use to support students in the classroom, particularly with language learning. We have a grading task force, which you heard about earlier today, as well as our equity trainings with EPIC and Youth for Tomorrow, which is being piloted at Hanshaw and Downey, and that's a group that's there to support young men of color. We have implemented Performance Matters, which is an assessment platform that helps teachers to build assessments for their students. It also helps to manage data. And one of the wonderful things about it is it has an early warning indicator. So you could pull up information on students, and based on a variety of assessments they may have had or engaged in, it has information about how to intervene to help that student. And then perhaps one of my favorite is Hatching Results. We have 2 high schools involved in Hatching Results, and we're hoping to add more. They're reporting that this has been an amazing training for them. And what it is our high school principals and our counselors are engaging in training with a highly successful group of trainers who have been counselors before and have seen great success in some of the strategies that they're using to interface with students. And along with that, we've also reduced the counselor ratio so that we can work more closely with our students. And with that, we're going to look at now our Advanced Placement and International Baccalaureate program with Dr. Will Nelson.
Thank you. Good evening, board and members of the community. Before I get going, I just want to, there was a typo there on the slide that Heather just went over, is improve your tomorrow. That's the additional support, okay, just so there's no confusion there. But the next few slides I'm going to take you through is for our Advanced Placement and International Baccalaureate program. This data slide that you will see show our student groups in which we've had some growth. And as you know, and you've heard over and over, that there's been some tweaks and modifications based on COVID for both exams as well as how students take them, how students prepare. We did see several of our student groups increase, but we also saw participation rate slide a little bit for about half or the majority of our students. So there is work to do. The passage rate, as you can see there, is very key. That you can see that there were some increases from 18, 19, 19, 20, but then in 2021, we have some challenges that we have to continue. Now, as you heard, that COVID is a challenge, but we are wanting to step up and do more for our students. And What I also want to add in that data point there, which is actually a success rate, and I'll speak to it again in just a minute, was that it also includes the 2021 data, Henshaw Middle School in our DLA program, adding advanced placement as well. So the key findings. We know the impact of COVID. You've heard that already. Number of students passing the exam has decreased. Pass rate has been impacted through distance learning. However, something to really be proud of and celebrate is that our 8th grade Henshaw students in the dual language program, we had 4 of them score a 3, which is a passing grade. So we want to continue that, which leads me to the next slide. Of course, we want to look at increasing AP enrollment, and what does that look like? In servicing our coordinators, our teachers, utilizing our data systems, continuing support of our DLA program with Henshaw, as well as increase the AP classroom resources, and that's working with our CIPD department and moving forward. This next slide of data is for our IB program, and this participation rate, this participation rate reflects the students who are in the program and as far as their percentage of their student group. And here, once again, you see one student group slight increase, but there are some challenges with participation over 4 years. So now I'll speak to that in just a second. Here, I want to give you a second to look at the IP diploma rate. And while you do that, I'm going to say a statement to you. The IP diploma candidates can do a series of internal assessments that are a part of the IB course and sit for a series of 6 exams at the end of their junior and senior years. IB diploma is awarded based on a total score of those exams plus points earned for excellence in extended essay and theory of knowledge. The extended essay is a required component of the IB diploma program. It is an independent piece of research done with a one-on-one guidance of an advisor, accumulating with a 2,500 to 4,000 word paper. The theory of knowledge course is an opportunity for students to reflect on their nature of knowledge, and how we will know that and a claim that they know. So the TOK course, or theory of knowledge, is assessed through an exhibition of a 1,600-word essay. So looking at our key findings, one is aligning our data points with our mod dashboard with Performance Matters, working directly with, as you know, this is one high school, which is Modesto High, which has done a tremendous amount of work, and a lot of kudos to their teachers and students, and I'll get to that in a second. Well, actually, here it is, the second bullet. You can see the 88% diploma pass rate. Now, you say, okay, you saw those challenges passing the test. We still had 38 out of 43 students earn their diploma. That beats the worldwide average. And that is something consistently, you talk to the MOHI team, they do it consistently. 66% of those earned the diploma, 30 or more points received, so meaning they received course credit. There was 413 subject matter exams, and just to show off a little bit for the MOHI grads of last year, some of them attended schools such as Harvard, Duke, Brown, Berkeley, Tulane, Cornell, UCLA, to name a few. So next steps. Continue to expand our IB course offerings to all Modesto High School students, including our English learners. Continue to provide support and training to our IB teachers and administrators. Looking at intercession, summer programs to support. And then for us is to start to explore the idea of looking at IB K-12. So that means a primary years program, that's elementary, and a middle years program, that is for the middle junior high schools, that will feed into Modesto High's IB program. So I'll turn it over now to our Director of English Learners, Mrs. Marcela Mota.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. So I will be presenting today on Summit of LPAC, the State Seal of Biliteracy, and also the State Seal of Civic Engagement. So as a reminder, Summit of LPAC is the assessment given annually to English learners from February 1st to May 31st. The assessment assesses students in 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. It's also one of the criteria used for reclassification. Since 2019, students need an overall score to be of 4 to be reclassified. So this is a slide that Brad Godot mentioned earlier. I did revise it to give you a 3-year perspective. So last year we assessed about 6,400 English learner students. Most of the assessments were done in person. We decided to do that specifically to target our English learners and give them a test setting that was conducive of a good testing environment. But we also did offer remote testing for those that needed it. In 2021, 527 or 8% of students received a 4. And to give you a little bit of context to this number, in 2019, 598 or 9.6% of students received a 4. While in 2019-2020, only 287 students received a 4, and this was due to school closures. We unfortunately did not get a chance to finish the assessment that year. And I just want to give you a little bit of background too. 2018-19, the assessments were on paper. In 2019-20, they were the first time on the computer, and then last year we continued with that. So there is a 1-year growth a 1-year change from 2019 to 2021. So let's look at the scores of 4 for 2020 a little deeper. So 9% of our students that received a 4 were students without a disability, while 2% were students with disabilities. Also, grade 12 had the highest percentage of students who scored a 4, while grade 1 had the lowest percentage. And this makes sense because our grade 1 were the ones that were impacted the most by the pandemic. So this table indicates the percentage of students that received a 4 broken down by student groups. So 8% of all Hispanic students that take the summative assessment received a 4, 10% of Asian students, and 16% American Indian students. Based on the data shown, our next steps is to continue to collaborate with administrators, teachers, and parents to review the parts of the summative assessment, and also importantly, to review the LPAC accommodations matrix to support our English learner students that also have a disability. So next I'll go into State Seal by Literacy. The State Seal by Literacy is a recognition given to graduating seniors who attained a high level of proficiency in speaking, reading, and writing in 1 or more languages, in addition to English. To earn the State Seal by Literacy, a student must have a GPA of 2.0 or higher in all English language arts requirements, pass the CASP ELA assessment in grade 11, and demonstrate proficiency in 1 or more languages. There are also multiple ways students can demonstrate proficiency, such as pass an AP language assessment, pass an IB assessment, pass an SAT assessment, or pass a locally approved assessment that meets the rigor of AP and test in all modality. Last year was the first year we implemented our local assessment. So here is our data for 2019-2020. So we had 238 students receive the State Seal. Last year we did have an increase of 307, and then the goal for this year is to increase to 323 or more. So looking at the data a little bit deeper for the State Seal, about 88% of our seal recipients were Hispanic, 6% were white. In addition, 2% of the recipients were homeless eligible, 2% were Title I Part C migrant students, and 8% were English learners. But I would like to clarify that in this definition of English learners, it includes students who were recently reclassified in the last 4 years. So our next step is to expand our locally approved assessments to ensure our students qualify. In other words, have more assessments in more languages. So last, I will review the State Seal of Civic Engagement. Unfortunately, Ms. Newton could not be here today, but I wanted to acknowledge all her work in the area because this is her work. So the State Seal of Civic Engagement is given to graduating seniors who have demonstrated excellence in civic education, with an understanding of the U.S. Constitution, California Constitution, and the democratic system of government. There are 5 requirements to earn the State Seal of Civic Engagement: be engaged in academic work, demonstrate understanding of the U.S. and California constitutions, participate in civic engagement projects, self-reflect on civic knowledge, and exhibit character traits that reflect civic mindedness. And the next slide, we have 100 students that earned the State Seal of Civic Engagement, and here you can see the breakdown. The numbers do not add up to 100 because it's broken down between Hispanic to Asian, it's one group. English only reclassified as another section, so there's multiple students in these, and then students with IEP. So in 2021, 100 students received the seal during our baseline year. 49% were Hispanic, while 35% were white. 65% were English-only students, while 34% were reclassified students. And 6% were students on IEP. Our next step is to promote the State Seal of Civic Engagement to increase our number of recipients. Next, I'd like to reintroduce Dr. Contreras for the next portion of the presentation.
Okay, last time, I promise. So really now you've heard a lot about all the different things we have going on and all of the things that people are doing to work to support our students, that we're looking at data and how we can address that data despite the challenges of the pandemic. Marisela didn't mention a great accomplishment that our EL department had, which I think speaks to us really engaging with our students and getting at that data and still trying to support them. And that is that the testing numbers she shared with you for the LPAC test, they had the state reach out to their department because they had done the most rigorous work across our state in getting the number of students they got to test and assess. So that really is quite an accomplishment, and I think it really speaks to the mighty department that our EL department is, as well as the support from CIPD. So I have a lot of good things going on that I think, hopefully you could hear that, even though the data isn't necessarily what we would like to see at this time. So some of our next steps include continuing with our robust intervention programs. We know they work. We've been monitoring them for a few years, and we've expanded them out. We're excited to see that data as we get them implemented. Still have some challenges there because of the quarantines, like I explained, and having some key personnel out and positions not filled, but we are making progress on that. We have a robust professional development department that is offering so many opportunities for all of our staff, not just our teachers, but our classified staff, our administrators, and our real focus on continuing the development of ourselves. And I know that that's going to impact our students. We all know that will impact our students. We're working on our data protocols so that we really are continuing to be a data-driven district, and I think you could hear that in all the data that we presented this evening. We're working on building in these protocols into all of our upper management meetings and also down to our principals and then down into our teachers, so that we have a protocol for how we look at data, how we talk about data, and most importantly, how we address the data. We have our leadership summits that our principals are engaged in, that our middle management is engaged in, and our cabinet is engaged in. And that's where we're really looking at, here's the data that we need to move and address for our students. Here's the actions we're engaging in. And if we are not seeing that growth, that we're reaching out to each other and networking so that we have resources that we need to be able to be more successful in areas that we see that maybe we're not getting the success that we would like to see. So we will be doing a board update for you in February of 2022. At that time, you can expect to see from us our 7th through 12th grade D and F report, as well as information on our intercession that will happen over the winter break, and then our intervention programs and the progress that they've made to date in February. And with that, are there any questions?
We'll first go out to the public to see if we have any comments from the public. Seeing none, we will go to the members of the board. Trustee Maestas, then Trustee Brown.
Thank you for this very in-depth report. Can I have a question, and then I got to do a little math, and then you can come back to me. Is that okay?
Sure.
I know that sounds weird, but what is the split on percentages of our elementary and high school? Like, what percent of students are in elementary and what percent of students are in high school?
I'm going to look to our enrollment people over here for accurate number.
So it's not quite 50-50. We had, in the next report, you'll see 13,808 TK8 students and 15,161 912 students.
That was 13,000.
13,808.
Okay. And then 15,161?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. I'll come back to me in a second. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Brown?
Yes, I appreciate that we're hearing the data, even though we've had extreme barriers in the last 18 months. I'm curious, I still hear lots of positive about SWAN math. And even though we have put a lot of resources in and we hear great things, feels like we're not seeing the numbers yet. Do we have anything that tells us when we can assess long enough that we can see where the progress is and at what grade levels?
So Mike Rich would normally maybe be the best person for taking that. Yeah.
In absence of Mike Rich tonight, we do have our benchmarks from SWAN that we're using, albeit I'll say that, first of all, the trends are the same as we're looking at our ELA data. We're struggling to fill in those gaps from COVID. But also remember, last year we only had our small pilot group, and then this year we have everybody else that's all of K6 participating, and the 7-8s have now chosen their own adoption. So we're really in that first cycle of all of our elementary schools utilizing the curriculum. And we do have some bright spots. I believe third grade was a shining spot for us, but we can get you that data.
I think it's going to be exciting when we can see a full year.
Absolutely.
And I still am thinking positively and hoping that we see some tremendous increase, because we were promised some great opportunity.
Trustee Mejia?
Well, first of all, it's a very detailed report, so I appreciate that. I have a few questions, and you don't have to answer them all right now, but I want to put them out there. I'm just curious, looking at some of our numbers and some of the participation in some of these international baccalaureate programs, it seems like the Hispanic Latino enrollment in those numbers it doesn't really match the population. And so I just wanted to bring that up. How can we work on getting more participation and then supports for those students? And just because I'm looking at 65% versus smaller percentages and the participation, graduation, and completing of those courses.
So I'm going to ask Ryan to come up. Can you please explain the rate, like what you were talking to me, the question I asked you earlier? So when we say it's 17% of Hispanic in participation for IB, can you explain what that 17% is?
And do the best I can. All
Okay.
right. So that particular key performance indicator was originally designed to increase participation or to track the increase in participation in the IB program. And so at the top level, it's the percent of students participating in the IB program divided by the total population at Modesto High School. So then when you disaggregate that by federal ethnicity, it's the number of students of that particular federal ethnicity participating in IB divided by the total number of students who have that shared federal ethnicity who attend that school.
So in looking at the 17.8 for Hispanic for 2021, 17.8% of the total Hispanics at Mo High were enrolled in one or more courses in IB.
Or pre-IB.
Or pre-IB.
Because
Okay.
technically IB does not start until, your junior year, so.
So it's not 17% of IB, it's 17% of the Latinos at Mo High that's participating in IB. So it's a little, it's your point is still taken, Trustee Mejia. I mean, it's lower than the other student groups, but it's different than what it appears, and that's why I did want to share that.
We have Vice President Lopez, then Trustee Irvin. We're going to circle back around to you. I want everyone else to have a chance to speak, please.
Yeah, well, I was going to continue on that thread, and thank you, Trustee Mejia, for bringing it up. But I was going to ask that, which makes me ask now, why don't we have those numbers of how many people, because it's very misleading. When you talk about participation, you would think it's how many individuals in X amount of individuals that are in IB account for 17% of those are of Hispanic origin or African American or white. So can we get those numbers first of all, and then aside from that, can we get actual numbers? And my question was the total number of individuals that are participating, however we measure participation in the IB program? And then second of all, I do know that this is a merit-based program, but not only is it exclusive to Modesto City Schools students. We have very well-known cases of individuals coming from Turlock, Escalon, further one of our congressman was the part of the IB program, but he's from Turlock. So we bring from outside. So what is the breakdown of individuals that come specifically to our district for the IB program, right?
Good question.
I did ask our IB coordinator to run for this year. What does that look like? I think we have to work, and if you remember, part of our next step for IB is aligning these data practices so that we can be more clear in the data, as our superintendent pointed out. But I can share this with you, that from 9th grade to 12th grade, which means pre-IB and IB, students that are enrolled in at least one course, it's a total of 258 students. 77 of those students are from Modesto City Schools, meaning elementary, middle. The other 181 are non-MCS students. So if you remember, in part of the next steps and exploring this year is looking at a PYP and MYP program, which allows us to work on our program K-12, but we have to explore, there's some work to do.
Thank you for the information. Yeah. And yeah, so yeah, it was I want to say that, yeah, it was a little bit tricky to understand that, and that makes a lot more sense of what that looks like, the representation of 17% of all the students in Modesto High, but that be just anyone that attends, right? And it has to be under the specification of Hispanic, right? Correct. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
I'd like to point out, too, one of the next steps overall, too, was our leadership summits and the IB program, and looking at how we build different student groups into that program is actually a summit goal.
Trustee Irvin?
Yes, again, thank you for the in-depth report. My question has to do with English language arts and math and comparison by language learners. I know we had the data for math and language arts for special education and language learners. I'm trying to figure that because I'm reading some data that I've seen where, and particularly both English language learners and mathematics, where our ELs and African American students are not far apart in data when it comes to English language arts and mathematics. And so what I'm trying to figure out, one is how does that happen with native English learners, and now that we have native English learners in our school systems, and this is, California-wide is here, making progress with our ELs and not making progress with our African American students. And so what strategies and processes do we need to address in terms of seeing progress on that side of the bar as well. So I'm just reading different articles, seeing different things that I just thought it was disturbing. For one, to notice that we're not making progress with African American students in those two, specifically in those areas.
So Trustee Irvin, let me try to address that. So part of what we're doing as we've built our data systems, because you've watched this program be built over 3 years. So we now have the capacity to look at data relative to student group. You'll see the student groups and the the different ethnicities as well. And so that's part of our process that we're using with all of our programs that we're monitoring moving forward. So when we go back to that list of all the different interventions that you guys are going to be approving in the ESSERs, we take a look at all of those programs and we desegregate it out by student groups, right? And then we take a look at what's working, what's not working, and then why. So up to this point, we really haven't taken a deep dive into those as methodically as we are moving forward. So I do anticipate having data more readily available on what's working and what's not working, and when it's not working, what do we need to do to get it to work? And so that's part of the data protocols when we talked about how are we having conversations around the data. It's more than just looking at the numbers, but it actually goes into, well, what was done, how did it work, and what could we do differently? So that's that whole summit process that I shared at the end of last year with you. So that is the question for all groups, right? So what do we do? Where is it not working, and what can we do to make it work? And so that's the work that you're going to see in this next 6 months, next year, as we continue to unfold that with the accountability of all the massive intervention programs that we have out there.
Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you for this report. I appreciate the transparency. It's wonderful to hear kudos from Dr. O, and it feels good. But if we don't know our areas of weakness, we're never going to improve. So I think it's sometimes difficult to hear, but I think it's important that we know what's happening so that we know what we can do to make things better. I was very excited about seeing the possibility of the IB program expanding into our elementary schools and our junior high schools. I know we need to do some research in that. Do we have an idea of time frame of when that might be implemented?
You can see I'm looking at our superintendent.
I mean, are we talking 2 years or are we talking 20 years?
I don't want to say both. In my experience of doing it, in my previous district, we actually did it with the middle school, and it took a couple of years because it is a school-wide program. You can't just come in and everybody's doing IB. It's a little bit more than that. And as you saw with Dr. O's presentation, that's going to be very important. Second is informing those communities of whatever schools we look at and making sure parents and everybody else understands what they're getting into, because there's other elements to it, including projects, including school-wide activities. There's a lot more to it. So we do need some time to first ID what we want, what schools can be a part of it, and then the training, which is pretty intensive. If you've never been IB training, it's like a week long and it's intensive. So it is going to take a little time. So to answer your question is, we could move faster or not. That's why we want to explore. But I don't want to commit to 1, 2, 3 years, because some schools may need a little longer, and, it's okay if we get there.
I just know we talk about becoming a destination district, and when I worked for the Sylvan District, that IB program at Modesto High School was really appealing to a lot of people, and I think if we were able to offer IB sort of classes going to the elementary level, wow, what a great thing for us to be able to have in the future if that's able to work out. I would love to see that happen. And my last comment, and then we're going to circle back. The key findings under the CASP with all of us, it's very concerning. The students with disabilities, the English learners, no growth over the last 3 years. African Americans, still that significant achievement gap. So I know we're going to be delving into it, and we're going to be looking at what we can do to improve it. But those are areas of deep concern for me as well. So we'll get back, okay, so Trustee Maestas and then Trustee Marks.
Thank you. Thank you for those data that I asked about. When I was calculating some percentages between the two to separate that, to wrap my head around some of these other numbers. So some of the data that would be nice, because we have a lot of this stuff split apart in elementary and high school. You gave the federal ethnicity breakdown for the entire district, but you didn't give it in terms of separated between elementary and high school. And I'd like to see that, because what I'm going to reference right now really is a separate issue in high school and elementary. So if I can get those, that would be helpful. I got a lot of notes. I'm sorry. I'll try to be as fast as possible. Circling back to something that Trustee Irvin said about those data, and I think this comes back to Dr. O's research. We can't fix some of these issues, interventions, all of this stuff, until we get equity figured out. And that's what's going to get us to the point where we want to see these numbers change. So that's my firm belief on that. So a couple things. The CASP, it wasn't in here, but I thought it was something to note in that the CASP was abbreviated last year, and so these data do not reflect a full CASP. They reflect an abbreviated CASP, and I believe this year it's also going to be abbreviated. So the data that we collect this year will also be on abbreviated information. So it won't be full, which is likely, I think, why we're not getting a breakdown in the specific areas. We're only getting an overall score. So that, I think that was something to point out in terms of these data here. So then the thing that I really want to focus on is this AP data. I used to be an AP teacher for many, many years, and I was a bit confused on the percentages. So I'm going to ask that again. If these were calculated the same way as the IB, but only looking at the entire high school district rather than just the Modesto High, because they add up to over 100%, which means they have to be something different than the percentage of students that are taking the course.
Yeah, I'm just conferring with Ryan there, but it is the percentage of the student group, right? Correct, of the population. So when you see 8.9, if you're looking at the Hispanic or Latino, is 8.9 of that group overall as a district. Because remember, this is the entire district, including Hanshaw.
Right.
So that's where that percentage comes from. And so that's why you could actually get over 100%, because it's a percentage of that specific student group. And this is going back to what earlier Mr. Lopez and others spoke to, is making sure we're clear on, and you're speaking to it as well, as being clear on some of our data points.
Okay, thank you. So that being said, 8.9%, if we're looking across the high school district, roughly is about 5.6% of the entire population if you're looking at the Hispanic population in our district. We talk about equity, and here's the clear number. This should line up to closer to where we would see our entire, like if we didn't have to, if equity wasn't a problem, we would see similar percentages than the entire district, but we don't. 8.9 compared to 60%. And doesn't look like even in 2018 we were at 11.3%. I feel like this is a place that we really need to focus our attention, because these are the kids that are going to go to college, right? Not saying that college is the only pathway for everyone, but we do know when students take advanced placement courses, they are, even if they don't do well on tests, that's why I don't really look at the pass rate. The study that just came out from the College Board is that they're significantly in a better place to pass their first year of college and be retained and go on to complete a college education. And so I feel like there's a lot of work to be done here. And it's not just something that's going to happen overnight. I'm not thinking it's going to happen in a year or 2 or 3, or, it's a long process. But I would love to see within my tenure on this board some real improvement in the equity in our AP program. Because this is probably the most disheartening piece of this whole thing for me personally. So that's kind of all I had to say. It makes a whole lot more sense to me now. So thank you very much for this lot of information here.
Trustee Marks?
First, I just want to say, yes, I agree with the advanced placement, that it is really critical in our district. I know in the past we have really pushed students to get enrolled into advanced placement classes and then to take the tests. I think we even funded them in the past for them so that they would take the test, so we could have more students at least having an opportunity to see where they were and that they could go to college. So I hope, and I don't know where we are right now with that, but that was something that I thought was a great idea to help improve the students enrolled in advanced placement and then also taking the test. But the other item, and then yes, it was, for me, I looked at the exam pass rate, and that was very discouraging to me, especially for the students of 2 or more races and the Black or African American students. They were twice as they were double, behind what the other students were. And then really interesting was the Native American or Alaska Native they would have 11.4%. I mean, that was impressive. So just because that population group has many challenges. So I was really happy to see that. At least that is making some progress. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for having this. To me, it was a courageous conversation around really difficult numbers. We all knew that 2020 was going to be really difficult for all of us, but the fact that we're actually getting ahead of it by reporting out, here's where we are, we knew it was going to be really hard, and we're just going to admit that. And then now, let's look forward and let's see where we're going. And so that's what I appreciate about tonight. You gave us key findings, you gave us plans for the future, next steps. And that's what we need to do. We need to start looking towards that, and how can we change, and how can we help our students succeed, and how can we work with the staff, do the PD that we need to do. So I just appreciate all of the hard work that's gone into this report. I know it's been discouraging for everybody, but including parents. So I'm just grateful that we're at this point in our district talking about this now instead of waiting or hiding it or not being transparent. So I appreciate that we're doing this. So thank you.
Trustee Irvin, did you have another comment?
Yes, as a parent as a daughter, against my advice, took 3 AP courses this year, and doing well in them. But I've always encouraged my children to take advanced placement. My middle daughter was in the IB program at Modesto High. She didn't get the IB diploma, but the rigor for her, I think, led to her success in college, getting her degree in 5 years. I just wanted to say that, from African American parents, a lot of them carry the stigma that they don't think their children could aspire to take part in a program like that. So even as a community, we have to do more educating on that as well. And that's what I wanted to make a comment about the data that I pointed out. As a district, I think we could provide strategies for the community, African American community, to put things in place from a community standpoint to help us help our students as well. You know, I'm from Los Angeles, and you know, there's always math academies and reading academies on Saturdays that African American community puts on for students in particular neighborhoods or areas there. You know, and I know that here, the Latino community, you know, you have LCR, you have HLC, you got El Concilio that offers English language classes and citizenship classes, and I think that reinforces what their students are in the schools and they're learning as well, you know, helps motivate, you know, them. So I think that's where some of the disparity comes as well, because of those community foundations that are laid within the community, and I just think we could do the same as African American community, is provide some of those resources and things like that in partnership to be able to, you know, help elevate the students who are falling behind. So I just wanted to point that out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other lights or hands, I'd like to thank you for this report. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving on to item B6, we have approval of ESSER 3 expenditures plan. Mr. Hurst.
When you're blind, you need glasses. So, sorry. So, good evening, President West, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Naguchi, Cabinet, and the public that might be with us. Again, my name is Steve Hurst, Director of State and Federal Programs, and I'm here today to seek approval of the ESSER 3 expenditure plan. So, purpose today obviously is to review quickly the ESSER 3 expenditure plan and then ask for approval of that plan. So, from a goal, let's try this again. From a goal alignment, the thing that you look at with these is the ESSER 3 plan really does align to all 5 of our strategic goals. It impacts various goals in various different ways. And so it's not like we're going to come up here and say it's 1.3 specifically. It is all of goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, goal 4, and goal 5 that are impacted by this plan. So again, just a quick background again, the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARP, was enacted by Congress in response to the 2019 novel coronavirus, or COVID-19. It was signed into law on March 11th of 2021. It is a third of the 3 plans that the Congress has passed, but it is the one that does require the districts to complete an expenditure plan and have it approved by the board. At the October 4th presentation to the board, I gave a lot more details regarding the background of the plan and the process that was involved with that. That PowerPoint's available to the public to look at rather than repeating it again tonight. So tonight, really want to do is an overview of the plan elements and then seek approval. So as you recall, there are 3 sections within the action part of the plan. The first one is the strategies for continuous in-person instruction. And based on the feedback and what you've seen tonight, even with all the results and everything we've been talking about, some of the things to highlight here, and again, this is an overview aspect of it, is increased support for the Modesto Virtual Academy. We've had definitely a lot of parents who've wanted to continue to educate their students at home. COVID-19 testing and monitoring, obviously, if we do want to bring students back, we have to have processes in place. That is a lot of time, energy, work, and processes. I know some people, it seems like that's all they've been doing lately, is just that aspect of it. Supervision, we have to increase sometimes, especially at our elementary levels, just so that we can support that social distancing. And a big piece of this is the before and after school care, making sure that we're able to address the needs of our parents and our students. And so this is kind of just the highlight areas of what's involved in that aspect. If it says TK-12, that means it's both high school and elementary district. TK-6 would only be in the elementary district. Looking at the second area of actions, this one is the addressing impact of lost instructional time. This goes back to what we just talked about with some of these results that we just saw. This one does have, as I recall, the 20% minimum requirement, that 20% of the funds do have to be spent in this area. And this one has a lot of actions. These are not necessarily new actions, but they're a way for us to either expand or continue these actions past their original funding sources. So when you look at things like the MTSS expansion, we had some money set aside through AB 86 to start that process. That was a 1 year. We're going to continue that for 2-3 more years using the ESSER dollars. And obviously that went to all elementary sites where originally it was about a 10 or 11. Student assistance specialists, that mental health need, that was a huge feedback piece of making sure that we've increased that, the amount of days on campus, all of the sites being looked at. Inclusion is included in this. We need to look at all of our student populations. So when you think about our students with disabilities, our English learners, all of those are included in this plan. You'll see that with the ALD increase in the 9-12 level, more classes for our English learner students. A big piece of our feedback and a big piece of really what we need to focus on is that remediation and intervention. What are we doing to address that lost instructional time, as well as already looking at the gaps that we existed, and increasing our after school and STEM opportunities for students. Those are, again, big feedback areas. We know that we need to re-engage our students, and this is the area that we want to focus on. Any money that wasn't used in those first two areas, what they call the remaining use of funds, this does have to follow the ARP Act guidance. There's a huge list that I gave you last time. But when you look at that, you can really see that we have some money focused on that technology and improvement. We are moving into a technology age where we're forced there, maybe quicker than we ever thought would happen. But along that line, we need to make sure that we have all the infrastructure and pieces in place. Facility improvements, not only to address safety and concerns related to COVID, but just how do we engage our students in an environment where they can learn and feel safe and feel that it's a place they want to come. So that outdoor learning that was presented previously, that's a great opportunity because it's something different than just the standard classroom that look at. We did need to invest in our human resources staff to support the additional hiring that's happening. And obviously we have the fiscal oversight that has to happen as part of this plan. Not only we have that, but we also have the monitoring of the actual outcomes that are expected to happen from the plan. So this is a summary of how the money breaks down into those categories by district. As you can see, we have a little over $47 million in the elementary district, and a little over 33, or we are just short of $81 million total over the next 3 years to support changing what we're doing here at Modesto City Schools. I know Dr. Naguchi started back in May talking about reinventing the schools. This is what this money allows us to do. It allows us to find what's working, implement that, and change that's not working. So with that, our next steps is I would like to request the board to approve the plan. If the plan, and when it is approved, it does have to go to the County Office of Education for review prior to it being submitted to the California Department of Education. And then obviously once that happens, we really do need to implement the plan and the monitoring piece of it, which would be ongoing throughout that process. So at this time, I would like to ask the board to approve the ESSER 3 expenditure plan that has been presented to you and you have copies of. And with that, if there's any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the public on this item? Seeing none, we will go to board members. Trustee Marks.
I had a question on, so is this the total amount to be spent? Do we allocate it totally, or is there still extra money that we're still deciding on?
We have, in our plan, we have accounted for all of the funding. I'm not going to say that, every dollar is exact. So there's, it's an estimated funding. And again, as we talked about last time, if things need to move as either, costs change or we decide to move the plan based on input and feedback, there's ability to do that. But we did, within the plan, allocate every dollar in one of the lines or within some type of a function.
Okay. I was asking that because on the technology, I know technology increases every year.
Yes.
I know we've allocated almost $3 million for that. I still was hoping, I didn't know, we don't know what the future is going to hold, but we do know that technology is going to be the future. And so I just wasn't sure if we had enough in there for technology supports for, let's just say, next year, next summer, that when the governor's, let's just say it's enacted, that every student has to be vaccinated that comes to school. And we have, I don't know, let's just say 20% or 30% of our students say, their families say, no, we're not going to do that. And they're not going to come into the classroom. So how are we going to support them? So I'm just putting a scenario out there. There's a very possible scenario for many people right now. Don't know if it's going to happen like that next year, but how are we going to support them? So I did bring up, using some kind of synchronous learning that maybe would help the teachers be able to do that so students will still be in the classroom. But I'm just asking it again because I have that in the back of my mind. So can we change, so you're saying, from what I understand, that we can change how we're allocating these funds in the next 3 years if that turns out to be an actual scenario. It may not, but if it does.
Yeah, so there's a couple things to consider. Remember that in addition to ESSER 3 in this plan, which we're asking, which has the ability to be revised, it would be simply coming back to the board and presenting the revision. It does not have to go back to the state, actually.
Okay.
We also have ESSER 2 money and those other different funds that are out there. So when we look at this, we're looking at the big picture. So we might have 3 million in here for technology. That doesn't mean that we didn't also put 4 million in ESSER 2 money in the technology. So that's the piece that it has to be, is this is specific to this plan. Additional to that, if things change and we find that we need to support in a different way, then we have to look at where the money could be reallocated in an effective way that would still support the overall plan accomplishment.
Okay, that's good. That's great. And I really appreciated the fact that there were comments from the public on what the public wanted. So it was really helpful to read that and see that we had some of the same comments that they did at our last board meeting on summer school and after school programs and just more, just programs that supported their students. So I was impressed with this whole thing. It was a lot to read, but I appreciated having that information. So if the public asks, we have some information on where the money's being spent.
Seeing no other lights or hands, I'm looking for a motion to approve the ESSER 3 expenditure plan. Trustee Mejia, seconded by Trustee Marks. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Any nays? No. Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
This takes us to B7, which is the report on enrollment counts for 2021-2022 as of September 3rd, 2021. Mr. Zierle?
Thank you, President West. Ryan Reynolds has left, but even if he was here, I would tell him that he does win the award for most exciting enrollment report tonight. As he talked about the types of students we serve, and he had fancy graphics that you will not see in this particular report. However, annually, we provide a report to the board after the first 4 weeks of the school every year. And so I'm going to do the best to just highlight the report that's in the agenda for you. As this year is kind of unique in that due to the pandemic, the 2021 enrollment numbers are now going to establish what we call a new base year for our funding purposes. And due to the pandemic, 2019-20 is currently and is still our base year for funding, as last year we did not collect attendance for the full year. And so we're called what is held harmless based off of the 1920 enrollment and attendance numbers. Unless there's legislation proposed this January by the governor, we are potentially facing 2 years of declining enrollment because of that for the 22-23 school year, or about 620 less students over a 2-year period from 2019 and 2020. But for this year, because we are 2 districts, our report is broken down into TK8 and 9-12 enrollment, with an emphasis placed on what we call general education enrollment, as that is the student population we project annually every year, and we project that student population for not only revenue projections, but also for staffing projections in the general education classes. So for this year, we are seeing after the 4th week of school, 332 less TK8 general ed students from the prior year, and 355 less overall TK8 students. When we factor in special education, we are down 355 students from the prior year. On our 912 student population, we are up 251 912 general education students from a year ago. But when we factor in our alternative ed population and special ed population, it reduces it down to 84 overall from the prior year. So we've seen some significant increases in our 912 student population, and the consistent decrease that we've seen over the last several years in our TK8 student population. When we look at the specific grade levels, especially at TK8, we see some interesting dynamics, and we know kindergarten, transitional kindergarten and kindergarten was hard to project last year, hard to project this year. However, we do see some exciting things when we look at our current first grade population in the data. We've grown 143 students in first grade that we didn't have as kindergarten last year. So there probably is some realization to the fact that some of our kindergarten parents did not register their students last year as kindergartners. So it's nice to see that we have a bump in first grade this year when we look at cohort progression from year over year. However, we do see the continual decrease from sixth grade to seventh grade. So when we look at our data, where are we losing students from? Where are we gaining students from across grade levels? Well, this year we saw decreases, cohort decreases across all grade levels. We did see 134 students that did not return to us as seventh graders that we had as sixth graders. So that's a concern, and that's just something we're going to monitor and look at going forward. So next steps, we're going to what we call dive deeper into the data to determine where a significant portion of our population are coming from. As we heard earlier in the IB presentation, there's a significant number of students that come to us not from our elementary population. So where's our students coming from? But also more importantly is where are they going? Where are they leaving us and going, and why? And so that's something that is a priority of the superintendent, and it's something we're going to be working on with the data, looking at diving deeper into trying to figure out why we're losing students between grade levels year over year. So with that, that's kind of a summary of the report, and I'll open to any questions that the board may have.
Going out to the public first, seeing no one. Any questions or comments from board members on this report? Seeing none. Thank you so much for this report.
Thank you.
Okay, item B8 is the ratification of the letter of agreement between Modesto City Schools District and Modesto City Schools managers for the 2020, 2021, and 2021-2022 school years. Mr. Henderson.
Good evening, Board President West, trustees. As you stated, this item brings for the board's consideration the approval of the ratification of the LOA with the managers for compensation increase to the district contribution to health and welfare benefits, and other terms and conditions of employment. Allow me to take a moment to recognize and appreciate the ongoing time, effort, and resilience of the district's management team. Their work to maintain a supportive and stable learning environment at school sites, and support to the sites by managers in various district office departments, all in the context of all the ongoing challenges we know are there with COVID, has been incredible and admirable. So back to the letter of agreement, it covers the 2 years as you've noted and reflects the following terms: 4.5% ongoing increase to the salary schedule effective this year. It continues the district's commitment, Dr. Naguchi's commitment to professional development initiative, and as well as bumping that up to the opportunity to get up to 1% of base salary for 12 hours of PD. increase in district contribution for employees selecting district medical plans. The same COVID leave provision that was allowed and agreed upon for our certificated unit. Provides us flexibility to offer hiring incentives for hard-to-fill management positions so that we can increase our recruitment and retention efforts, and an increase to the longevity steps on the salary schedules as an added retention incentive. So upon approval by the board, the terms of the LOA will be in effect as noted, and the fiscal impact is also noted. It's recommended the board ratify the LOA with between the district and the managers for 2020 to 21 and 21-22 school years.
Thank you. Going out to the public and seeing none. Do we have any comments or questions from board members? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to approve the ratification of the letter of agreement between Modesto City School District and the city school managers for 2020-2021 and 2021-2022 school years. Moved by Trustee Marks, seconded by Trustee Brown. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously. And our next item, B9, and our last item, approval of amendment to cabinet salary schedule effective July 1st, 2021. Health and welfare benefits effective January 1st, 2022, and other terms and conditions of employment. Mr. Henderson.
Thank you again. Consistent with this last item that we just did, item B9 brings forward for the board's consideration this amendment to the cabinet salary schedule previously established by the board, as well as an increase, as you mentioned, to health and welfare benefits, contribution, and other terms and conditions of employment. The recognition and appreciation noted in the previous item is extended to the cabinet level of district leadership for their stewardship of the district under Dr. Naguchi's direction. The amendment effective July 1, 2021, except for the health and welfare contribution, which will become effective upon approval on January 1, 2022, reflects the following terms: a 4.5% ongoing increase effective July 1, the same commitment to the district's professional development initiative as that is provided to other managers, the same increase in the district contribution toward health and welfare plans, and the same COVID leave provision for fully vaccinated employees who contract COVID during work-related business. Upon approval, the terms of the amendment will be in effect as noted, and the fiscal impact is also noted in the agenda item. With that, we ask the board for approval to this amendment to the cabinet salary schedule and effective July 1, and health and welfare benefits effective January 1, and other terms and conditions of employment as noted.
Thank you. Seeing no members of the public, do we have questions or comments from the board on this item? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to approve the approval of amendment to cabinet salary schedule effective July 1st, 2021, health and welfare benefits effective January 1st, 2022, and other terms and conditions of employment. Moved approval by Trustee Marks and seconded by Trustee Mejia. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes unanimously.
Thank you, trustees.
We appreciate all the work the managers and the cabinet has done the last 2 years. And always, not just the last 2 years. Do we have any items to be placed on future Board of Education agendas? And so now I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Trustee Maestas. That was a good one. Sorry, Maestas, seconded by Trustee Mejia. Okay, there we go. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously, meeting adjourned.